Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales. Chapter 2858, Intercontinental Teleportation Magic Array Starlight Fortress, Summoning Tower. After spending over 80,000 magic crystals to purchase all of the materials he needed from Divine Tribe, Feng immediately began working on the Summoning Tower's teleportation array. The Summoning Tower's main purpose was to summon monsters. It was a construction unique to the Starlight Fortress. However, the Starlight Fortress itself could be considered a teleportation tower, as it possessed a teleportation array and a spatial node passed down since ancient times. These inheritances were what allowed the Summoning Tower to summon monsters from other worlds to fight for the Starlight Fortress. Under normal circumstances, it shouldn't be possible for the Summoning Tower to facilitate intercontinental teleportation. However, Feng was now a grandmaster in manipulating magic arrays. He even possessed a teleportation magic array design. Hence, he could make the impossible possible. Not to mention, he had also seen quite a few guild cities that possessed player-made intercontinental teleportation arrays in his previous life. To achieve intercontinental teleportation, one needed to fulfill 3 conditions. The first condition was to have a Grandmaster Magician. The second condition was to have a teleportation magic array design. The third and most important condition was to have a spatial node on one of the 2 continents. Only after fulfilling these 3 conditions could one construct an intercontinental teleportation magic array. Meanwhile, there weren't many spatial nodes on the 2 continents. In total, they numbered less than 20. Moreover, many of them were in dangerous forbidden lands. However, so long as one managed to secure a spatial node, they could freely travel between the 2 main continents, no longer subject to the various limitations of ancient intercontinental magic arrays. This was why Feng was adamant about acquiring the Starlight Fortress previously. The only flaw intercontinental teleportation arrays had was their colossal energy consumption. Instead of using magic crystals like ordinary teleportation arrays did, an intercontinental teleportation array required mana stones as fuel. Moreover, each teleportation cost 10 mana stones. If the job of synthesizing mana stones using magic crystals were left to a master alchemist, it would cost nearly 1,000 magic crystals per teleportation. With such a high cost, even superpowers wouldn't be able to afford to teleport people between continents in large numbers. However, even with such a limitation, the intercontinental teleportation array was still plenty amazing after all. The 2 main continents had different resources. Trading in these resources could net massive profits. Moreover, transportation by teleportation was much more convenient than by air or by sea. Most importantly, an intercontinental magic array could allow a guild to synergize its forces on the 2 continents. This guild could operate on the 2 continents as if operating on a single continent, free of the problems arising from operating on 2 different continents. This was also one reason Feng had been desperately working to become a Grandmaster Magician all this time. As Feng was quietly constructing the intercontinental magic array in the Summoning Tower, Divine Tribe's executives suddenly held a meeting in the guild's temporary residence in the Starlight Fortress. Phythalia, is what you say true? Can Black Flame really connect the 2 continents? Great Elder Adolf asked in disbelief as he looked at Phythalia. When Adolf heard that Feng had reached the half-step Tier 5 and world creation standards and single-handedly killed over a dozen Tier 4 NPCs, he had already been incredulous. Yet, Phythalia was now telling him that Feng could also create an intercontinental teleportation array. How could he possibly believe her? However, Adolf also understood one thing very clearly: Phythalia was never one to exaggerate things. Since she had said so, then this matter was most likely true. Only, he still couldn't help seeking further confirmation from her. With Black Flame's personality, it's unlikely he would lie. Not to mention, he doesn't have any reason to lie to us, Phythalia replied after giving the matter some thought. After all, even if he can't connect the 2 continents, with the strength and potential he has displayed and the Starlight Fortress's support, should Zero Wing fall on the eastern continent, it can easily rise again on the western continent. Zero Wing won't need our support at all. That makes sense. Adolf nodded. The Starlight Fortress had a Tier 4 Divine Dragon guarding it. Unless a Tier 6 god or a group of Tier 5 existences attacked the fortress, nothing could threaten the fortress. Not to mention, Feng was already highly likely to get promoted to Tier 5. Whether it was now or in the future, he definitely couldn't be underestimated. The reason I called everyone here is to recommend that we deepen our partnership with Zero Wing, Fithalia said as she took out a set of documents detailing the Eastern Continent situation. After sending a copy to everyone present, she continued, "This is the latest report on the Eastern Continent's state of affairs. Several more superpowers have come from the outer world recently. Although there shouldn't be any large-scale battles occurring between the outer world invaders and the Eastern Continent's natives, friction between the two sides will definitely occur one way or another. Meanwhile, Zero Wing's resources are extraordinary. A battle between Zero Wing and the outer world invaders is inevitable. Hence, I propose that we have some of the guild's Tier 4s head to the Eastern Continent to support Zero Wing. This way, Divine Tribe will have some initiative in future partnerships with Zero Wing." When Fithalia finished speaking, everyone present promptly nodded in agreement. Before today, they had merely treated Zero Wing as an ordinary superpower and did not put much thought into their partnership with the guild. However, after today's incident, they could no longer afford to do so. This was because Zero Wing possessed not only a half-step Tier 5 expert but also an intercontinental teleportation array linking the two continents. Once word of this teleportation array got out, the Starlight Fortress would undoubtedly become the Western Continent's focal point. At that time, the Starlight Fortress's income would definitely multiply by tenfold or more. If Divine Tribe could get a cut of this pie, it would be of significant help to the guild. With Divine Tribe's foundations, the resources from the Starlight Fortress might even allow it to rival the 5 great super guilds. I don't see any problem with this. Looking at Fithalia, Adolf pondered for a moment before saying, "Since we are going to help Zero Wing on the Eastern Continent, Fithalia, take McCaffrey and Crimson with you. The two of them should be able to help Zero Wing solve many problems." "Thank you, Great Elder." Fithalia was overjoyed when she heard Adolf's words. McCaffrey and Crimson, which were top combatants of Divine Tribe. The two of them possessed fragmented legendary items and were fully geared in epic weapons and equipment. Most importantly, both had broken through the 100% threshold of their mana bodies. Crimson Witch, in particular, had even reached the 105% completion rate. Adolf aside, the completion rate of Crimson Witch's mana body was the highest in Divine Tribe. If not for Fithalia owning a fragmented legendary weapon, she wouldn't be a match for Crimson Witch. I'll contact the two of them in a moment. As for everything else, I'll leave it up to you, Adolf said, nodding. Originally, Adolf had other plans for McCaffrey and Crimson Witch. However, taking into account Zero Wing's potential, he deemed deepening Divine Tribe's relationship with Zero Wing much more valuable. Shortly after Divine Tribe's executives concluded their meeting, Feng completed the Intercontinental Teleportation Array at the top of the summoning tower. Good. The spatial coordinates are stable. Now, I just need to set up a corresponding teleportation array on the Eastern Continent, and the two continents will be connected. Feng nodded in satisfaction as he looked at the intercontinental teleportation array before him. This intercontinental magic array was definitely his best creation since he began playing God's Domain. Not only did constructing this magic array require a lot of knowledge and understanding of the various elements of mana, but he also had to convert a Master Teleportation Magic Array into a Grandmaster Teleportation Magic Array. The difficulty of such a feat was simply extraordinary. Feng suddenly received a call soon after completing the Intercontinental Teleportation Array. "Guild Leader Black Flame, I have already arranged the matter you asked before," Fithalia said as she looked at Feng through the video chat. Smiling, she continued, you can head over to the Eastern Continent together with us at any time. If it's the Intercontinental Teleportation Array in the Hell Forest City secret land, we should be able to reach the Eastern Continent in less than 2 days. Together? Surprised by Phythalia's words, Xiaofan asked, "You plan on heading to the Eastern Continent as well, Commander Phythalia?" From what he understood, Divine Tribe had never shown any interest in the Eastern Continent. The guild had always focused on the Western Continent. Not to mention, the current Eastern Continent was an incredibly dangerous place. Most importantly, Divine Tribe had to pay a huge price to send people to the Eastern Continent. The superpowers controlling ancient intercontinental teleportation arrays normally charged around 8,000 magic crystals and various precious materials per person when facilitating travel between the two continents. Moreover, this was still considered a friendship price. Even for a superpower, having many people travel between the two continents would still be a considerable expenditure. In response to Xiaofang's question, Phythalia nodded and smiled. "Amicham. Our guild has some matters to deal with on the Eastern Continent. I'm afraid we will have to trouble you at that time, Guild Leader Black Flame. You're being too polite, Commander Phythalia. Your guild has helped me plenty on the Western Continent," Xiaofan said, chuckling. "If you encounter any trouble on the Eastern Continent, feel free to look for me. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Since you've said so, I definitely won't hold back when that time comes," Guild Leader Black Flame, Phythalia said, her smile turning even brighter. "Naturally." Xiaofan nodded. Besides Divine Tribe's status on the Western Continent, just being able to form friendly relations with Phythalia herself was already well worth his time. After all, there weren't many players capable of reaching Tier 6 in God's domain. Xiaofan ended his call with Phythalia, then sorted out the Starlight Fortress's income. He collected the 14 million gold and 930,000 magic crystals the fortress earned during this period and made his way to the fortress's entrance. And after he met up with Phythalia's group of 3, they promptly made their way to the Hell Forest City secret land's Intercontinental Teleportation Array. After waiting for more than a day for the teleportation array to activate, Xiaofan transformed into a streak of light and disappeared from the secret land. Chapter 2859, Returning to the Eastern Continent, Demon Mist Valley, what rotten luck. We actually got teleported to a forbidden land. Crimson Witch frowned as she observed the faint red mist surrounding her. Divine Tribe had conducted a thorough investigation into the Forbidden Lands on both continents. This was because these locations were incredibly dangerous, current players couldn't visit them. Moreover, players would first have to exit the Forbidden Land before they could teleport out of the map. After players entered level 100+ maps, it was found that these maps possessed plenty of spatial tears and random teleportation points. Any one of these traps had a high chance of teleporting players to dangerous locations like Forbidden Lands. Hence, to reduce the chances of their important combatants dying after getting teleported forcibly to a Forbidden Land, the superpowers investigated the various Forbidden Lands and provided this information to their members. The Demon Mist Valley was one of the better-known Forbidden Lands on the Eastern Continent. The reason for its fame was the red mist shrouding the map all year round. Anyone who entered this place, even Tier 48, would have their physique and senses heavily suppressed, unable to exert even half of their normal combat power. In addition, the monsters in the Demon Mist Valley possessed incredibly powerful defense and magic resistance. The weakest monster here was a level 130 Great Lord. There were also plenty of mythic monsters and even superior mythic monsters. Even Tier 4 experts would have a very low chance of survival if they got sent to this Forbidden Land unprepared. Hence, the various superpowers had placed particularly great importance on the Demon Mist Valley. Our luck isn't all that bad. At least we didn't get sent to the central region. We're only at the boundary between the inner and outer regions, McCaffrey, the Silver Lion Legion's vice commander, said after checking his map. Pointing at the valley in the forest in front, he continued, "We should reach the outer region in 3 hours if we head in that direction." The Demon Mist Valley did not just prevent teleportation, but its red mist also prevented Tier 4 players from flying. In fact, even flying mounts could only walk here. Guild leader Black Flame, let us hurry out of here. We'll get surrounded by monsters if we stay for too long. At that time, leaving the Demon Mist Valley will become even more troublesome, Phythalia suggested as she looked at Xiaofan. Although the red mist heavily suppressed players' perception, the monsters inside the Demon Mist Valley were unaffected. Hence, monsters would almost always notice players before players detected them. In addition, now that monsters in God's domain had gained self-awareness and greater intelligence, they would almost always ambush players in packs. Not to mention, their group was currently in the Demon Mist Valley's inner region. According to Divine Tribe's research, the chances of a superior mythic monster appearing here was quite high. Quite a number of mythic monsters also roamed the area. If their group caused a huge commotion, it could easily attract a pack of mythic monsters. Even for Tier 4 players like themselves, fighting multiple mythic monsters was very dangerous. Sure. Feng nodded. After arriving in the Demon Mist Valley, he had already spread his senses. Despite his perception getting suppressed to just a 2,000-yard radius, he still managed to discover 2 mythic monsters and more than 30 level 140+ Grand Lords. It would indeed be very troublesome if their small group had to fight against all these monsters. Following this, the group of 4 made their way into the valley under Feng's lead. Now that Feng's concentration had reached the Tier 5 standard and his control over mana had achieved world creation, even after walking through the valley for over an hour, the 4 did not come across a single battle. This situation confused Phythalia and the others, and they could only assume that an army of players had cleared this valley recently. However, as the group approached the outer region, the density of the monsters in the area also increased. Although Feng had a perception range of 2,000 yards, he still had greater difficulty finding a safe route to travel. Huh? Players? Suddenly, Feng detected strong mana fluctuations coming from a forest some distance ahead, indicating a battle taking place there. After advancing a little more, the group even began hearing sounds of battle. Shortly after hearing the noise, the group saw a level 145 superior mythic ranked 4-winged feathered dragon rising from the forest 1,000 yards away. The feathered dragon then used a breath attack, turning the forest within a 500-yard radius into ash. Along with the destruction of a portion of the forest, 3 figures, 1 female and 2 males entered the sight of Feng's group. These 3 players were all Tier 4 players. Feng even recognized 2 of them. One was 16th Cloud, the second vice guild leader of Shining Tiger, the other was the assassin Sorrowful Silence. The only reason the trio managed to survive the feathered dragon's breath attack was the Tier 4 guardian knight of the group. However, after taking on that breath attack, the guardian knight did not have much HP remaining. None of the 3 was a healer either, so the guardian knight could only rely on potions to heal himself. Evidently, it wouldn't be long before they fell to the superior mythic monster. Damn it! To think we'll actually die here. 16th Cloud, who wielded a crimson staff, glared at the 4-winged feathered dragon's 60-meter-long frame with inevitable frustration. That's right. We should have fought those people outside instead. It would be much better than getting killed by this monster, Sorrowful Silence said, nodding in agreement. There's no helping it. Who would have thought we would encounter such a monster as soon as we ducked into the inner region? 16th Cloud said with a bitter smile. I guess fate really wants us dead. They had gone to great lengths to escape the outer world experts' pursuit, running all the way from the Demon Mist Valley's outer region to the inner region. Originally, they thought they could lose those outer world experts after hiding in the inner region. They never imagined that a superior mythic monster might be guarding the border. The 4-winged feather dragon wasn't just a superior mythic monster. It was also the realm lord of this area. Even a 20-man Tier 4 team would have difficulty fighting it under normal circumstances, what more under the Demon Mist Valley suppression. And worse, the feathered dragon could fly. There was no way to escape it. Players that encountered the feathered dragon had only two options: kill it or be killed by it. There was no third option. However, before 16th Cloud and Sorrowful Silence could continue their conversation, the feathered dragon flapped its two sets of wings, sending countless wind blades at the three players. The boss did not give the trio a chance to catch a breather. Upon seeing the approaching wind blades, 16th Cloud swung her crimson staff, instantly raising a wall of flames in front of the three. The wall of flames rose over 100 meters, blocking all the oncoming wind blades. And once the flames stopped the attacks, they transformed into a phoenix that flew toward the feathered dragon. Tier 4 Curse, Phoenix Flame. Phoenix Flame was actually a Tier 4 offensive curse. However, 16th Cloud not only utilized it as if it were a defensive curse but even switched it to offense afterward. Her mastery of this Tier 4 curse was simply superb. However, just as the phoenix was about to devour the feathered dragon, the latter suddenly let loose a deafening roar. Immediately afterward, the flames making up the phoenix got extinguished one after another. The phoenix eventually disappeared before it could reach the feathered dragon's body. Mana Annihilation. 16th Cloud was thunderstruck when she saw the flames disappearing, her mind unable to accept this situation. If the flames had merely failed to damage the feathered dragon because they lacked power, she would still be able to understand it. However, as she held full control over the flames, she could tell that the flames hadn't died naturally. Instead, they got extinguished because the mana used to create and fuel them had been annihilated. How can a boss hold such a skill? This is cheating. Sorrowful Silence fell into despair as he looked at the feathered dragon. Although he didn't know the exact details of the situation because he wasn't the creator of those flames, he could tell that those flames had died due to mana annihilation. In other words, all spells would be a joke in front of the feathered dragon. Moreover, as an inferior dragon, the four-winged feathered dragon possessed incredible defense. If magical attacks were ineffective against it, it would be a nigh-invincible existence. After destroying 16th Cloud's curse, the feathered dragon flapped its wings and sent wind blades at the three players once more. It seems this is the end for us. Looking at the innumerable oncoming wind blades, 16th Cloud could only shrug helplessly and wait for death to claim her. Originally, she had hoped her Tier 4 curse would heavily injure the feathered dragon, creating an opportunity for their party to escape. However, let alone heavily injuring the feathered dragon, she couldn't even damage it. In front of an inferior dragon capable of using mana annihilation, an elementalist like herself was nothing but a joke. She was of no threat to it at all. Yet, just as the countless wind blades were about to strike 16th Cloud and the others, a magic barrier suddenly emerged from the ground before them. The barrier stopped the wind blades, releasing the trio from death's grip. Crystalline Barrier. When 16th Cloud saw the shattered magic barrier in front of her, she immediately recognized the Tier 4 spell used to create it. With his keen eyes, Sorrowful Silence quickly noticed some figures emerging from the distant forest. Vice Guild Leader, there are people coming from over there. At Sorrowful Silence's words, 16th Cloud promptly turned toward the direction he indicated. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. What entered her vision were 4 people, 2 male and 2 females, emerging from the forest roughly 500 yards away. It was evident that these 4 people were responsible for the Tier 4 defensive spell that had saved their party. Black Flame? When 16th Cloud saw one of the cloaked men of the group, she couldn't help her surprise. She had met with the man known as Black Flame once before, when negotiating with Zero Wing for partnership on behalf of Shining Tiger. However, after that event, she had paid very little attention to Zero Wing, focusing it all on developing Shining Tiger's forces in the Glory Empire. If not for Feng having accomplished astonishing feats that shook the entirety of God's domain, she would have long since forgotten his appearance. Chapter 2860, Eastern Continent Situation. 16th Cloud and the others noticed the three people moving behind Feng and were stunned when they saw the faces of these three people. No way! Commander Phythalia of Divine Tribe's Divine Hymn Legion is here. Isn't Divine Tribe active only on the Western Continent? She's not here alone. Even the Silver Lion Legion's Vice Commander McCaffrey and Divine Tribe's Crimson Witch are here. Both of them are Divine Tribe's top combatants. Crimson Witch is probably the one who helped us just now. Why did they come here all of a sudden? Although Divine Tribe wasn't famous on the Eastern Continent, it was very well known on the Western Continent. The guild's development had even skyrocketed recently, and it was now in existence close to rivaling the 5 great super guilds. Naturally, Divine Tribe was many times stronger than a recently established superpower like Shining Tiger. Yet, 3 of Divine Tribe's top combatants were now here. With the ability of these 3 people, they could normally preside over the guild affairs on their own. Having the 3 of them together was akin to Divine Tribe having its trump card legion stroll down the street of a city. Unless Divine Tribe was planning an important operation, such an action would be a complete waste of manpower. However, before 16th Cloud and the others could recover from their surprise, Phythalia and McCaffrey suddenly appeared beside the 4-winged feathered dragon. Phythalia promptly brandished her long sword and bombarded the Realm Lord with a rain of sword lights. As for McCaffrey, he raised his great sword and stabbed it into the ground. Subsequently, massive greatswords emerged from the ground and stabbed at the airborne feathered dragon. Compared to the Shining Tiger trio, Phythalia and McCaffrey evidently had far superior control over mana. Their ordinary Tier 4 skills nearly rivaled Tier 5 skills in power. They also perfectly coordinated their attacks, such that the feathered dragon could only defend against the attack of one and had no choice but to take the attack of the other. -31,654,215. Damage exceeding 30 million appeared above the feathered dragon's head, the attack provoking a pained cry from the superior mythic. Although this amount of damage was nothing compared to the feathered dragon's nearly 20 billion HP, 16th Cloud and the others couldn't even damage the Realm Lord. How strong! So, these are Divine Tribe's top combatants? 16th Cloud was astonished when she saw the combat prowess Phythalia and McCaffrey displayed. Although 16th Cloud recognized that she still couldn't rank at the very top of God's domain in terms of combat power, she was still a Domain Realm Tier 4 expert. She was also fully equipped with epic equipment. Yet, compared to Phythalia and McCaffrey, she still had a long way to go before reaching the top of God's domain. If possible, we wouldn't have chosen to enter this place, either, 16th Cloud replied with a bitter smile. The 3 of us entered this place because we had no other choice. Otherwise, the Outer World Tier 4 experts chasing us would have long since killed us. She was both Shining Tiger's second vice guild leader and a Tier 4 Domain Realm expert. If it were a month ago, nobody would believe her if she told them that other players were hunting her and had even driven her into a desperate situation. In fact, if 16th Cloud had come across such a situation, she definitely wouldn't tell anyone about it. Now, however, 16th Cloud did not mind revealing this matter to an outsider at all. She also didn't find it damaging to her self-esteem. On the contrary, she even felt proud about the situation. The 3 of you were actually cornered? Is the Eastern Continent situation that bad? Feng was surprised by 16th Cloud's words. In his previous life, Tier 4 experts remained existences that could not be underestimated, even 10 years after God's domain's launch. Even superpowers with Tier 5 and Tier 6 experts wouldn't have an easy time targeting and hunting down Tier 4 experts keen on escaping. After all, there were simply far too few experts in God's domain capable of getting promoted to Tier 4, and the bare minimum requirement for players to participate in a hunt for Tier 4 players was to be Tier 4 themselves. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to catch up with and surround the targeted Tier 4 player at all. And while Tier 5 and Tier 6 experts were indeed capable of overpowering Tier 4 experts in a head-on fight, they had to track down their target first before they could do anything. Hence, even for the various superpowers, hunting down Tier 4 experts was a headache. Yet, 16th Cloud's group of 3 Tier 4 experts was actually getting hunted. This told Xiaofan that the Eastern Continent was in far direr straits than what Divine Tribe's report described. Guild leader Black Flame, you must have been away from the Eastern Continent during this period, right? 16th Cloud wasn't particularly surprised by Xiaofan's question. Without withholding any information, she replied, "A few days ago, another 10 or so outerworld superpowers arrived on the Eastern Continent. One of these superpowers is incredibly strong, probably on the level of the 5 great super guilds. This superpower has many Tier 4s, as well as Tier 3 experts that exhibit combat power at the Tier 4 standard. Because of this superpower's appearance, the originally stable situation on the Eastern Continent changed instantly. Previously, the Tier 4 experts of the Eastern Continent superpowers could still roam the Demon Mist Valley's outer region. Now, however, let alone grinding peacefully in the outer region, we'd be fortunate not to get hunted by those outerworld experts." Previously, there had indeed been a huge difference between the Eastern Continent superpowers and the outerworld superpowers. However, it wasn't as if the Eastern Continent superpowers were utterly helpless to fight back. After all, even in the outer world, reaching Tier 4 wasn't easy. As a result, the outerworld superpowers did not have many Tier 4 players under their command, either. However, after that superpower showed up, the outer world's forces suddenly gained a slew of Tier 4 combatants. This instantly shattered the balance between the two sides and placed native Tier 4 experts like herself at an absolute disadvantage. Almost all of the Eastern Continent's resource-rich maps had already become the backyard of those outer world players, and trying to level up in these maps was now a monumental challenge for native players. "I see. No wonder you ran all the way here." Xiaofan finally understood the situation. There were many ways in God's domain to allow Tier 3 experts to possess Tier 4 combat power. Besides Tier 3 mana set equipment, combat arrays were more than capable of doing the job. However, combat arrays were incredibly rare, and producing them was also extremely troublesome. This was especially true when it came to the materials required. Nevertheless, so long as one managed to manufacture combat arrays capable of granting Tier 3 players Tier 4 combat power, one would be more than capable of dealing with Tier 4 players. After all, the precondition for Tier 4 players' invulnerability to Zerg tactics was that their opponents were Tier 3 combatants or weaker. If a Tier 4 player had to go up against a group of Tier 4 players, even a Tier 4 Apex expert would be pushed to the brink of death very quickly. Guild leader Black Flame, if you plan on leaving the Demon Mist Valley, I'd advise you to wait here for the time being. We entered this place just recently, so those outer world experts are probably still hanging around the outer region, 16th Cloud said. Although those Tier 3 experts with Tier 4 combat power are strong, their resistance to the foreign energy in the environment is still at the Tier 3 standard, so they can't stay in a forbidden land for too long. Judging by Xiaofan's reactions, 16th Cloud guessed that the man had not been updated about the Eastern Continent situation for quite some time now. Although Xiaofan was indeed extraordinarily strong and even had 3 powerful experts following him, his group would most likely still face a bitter battle if it had to go up against a large number of Tier 4 combatants. If the 4 weren't careful, they might even end up losing their lives. At present, the wisest option would be to wait until those Tier 4 combatants had left the Forbidden Land. "Thank you for the warning, but that won't be necessary." Xiaofan shook his head in response to 16th Cloud's advice. After voicing his gratitude, he promptly led Phythalia and the others out of the inner region. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. When Feng's party of 4 had gotten several hundred yards away, sorrowful silence and the Tier 4 Guardian Knight turned to 16th Cloud. What should we do now? Sorrowful silence asked. Do we wait here? Now that the 4-winged feathered dragon had fled this place, they should be safe for some time. We don't have a choice. Let's follow guild leader Black Flame, 16th Cloud replied, gritting her teeth. It might be impossible to break out of the encirclement with just the 3 of us, but with the strength of guild leader Black Flame's group, we should have a chance. 16th Cloud and the others ran after Feng's group. Chapter 2861, Natives. Demon Mist Valley, Outer Region. Due to the red mist shrouding the Demon Mist Valley all year round, the Forbidden Land was very humid, abounding with lush vegetation. Unlike the plants found in the outside world, the plants here seemed self-aware as they constantly moved about slowly. This made one feel they were traversing a maze when they traveled through the valley. Damn it! Those people sure know how to run. If they'd just tamely let us kill them, we wouldn't have to suffer so much. A level 143, Tier 4 female swordsman grumbled in dissatisfaction. That might be the case, but we also have to thank these people. A level 143, Tier 4 male berserker standing beside the female swordsman said. If not for these native Tier 4 experts, we wouldn't have an opportunity to earn alliance contribution points. I guess that's true. So long as we gather a few more points, we will be able to stay in the luxury zone where those major powers stay, the female swordsman said, nodding. A hint of anticipation flashing across her eyes, she continued, I heard that the luxury zone even sells drugs that extend one's lifespan. We can also use the extra points we earn to exchange for those drugs. I've heard about them too. Normally, those things are reserved for the upper-class young masters and young ladies. Ordinary people like us have no chance to touch these things, said a middle-aged man who was a level 145, Tier 4 elementalist. Now, though, those major powers have no choice but to ask professionals like us for help to take over this backwater world. It's a pity that the natives here are too inferior. Their control over mana, skills, and spells is terribly clumsy. If they were a little better, we would have more targets to hunt and more points to earn. As these Tier 4 players were chatting merrily, a party of players was eyeing them with contempt. These mercenaries really know how to dream. Do they think they can exchange for those life-extending drugs so easily? Jade Leaf commented as she looked at the bragging Tier 4 experts in disdain. Even our guild has trouble getting our hands on a few bottles, yet they think mercenaries like them can exchange for some? Jade, you can't say that. If we don't provide these people with some benefits, how would we get them to work for us? Awakened Abyss said, smiling. Moreover, thanks to this operation, we also get to exchange for those precious life-extending drugs without limit this time. This is a rare opportunity from the higher-ups. In the world they lived in, life-extending drugs were incredibly precious items. Even children of major families like themselves had great difficulty getting their hands on a bottle. However, they could now use the alliance contribution points they earned from killing native Tier 4 experts to exchange for these drugs, a precious opportunity, even for them. After all, who wouldn't want to live a longer life? Before Awakened Abyss could continue speaking, a level 144, Tier 4 ranger suddenly approached him in a hurry. Commander, we found traces of a group of people. These should be auras left behind by natives, the ranger reported in a quiet tone. 3 of the auras belong to the 3 people we were pursuing earlier. Good. Gather everyone for an ambush. Awakened Abyss commanded with a smile. So long as we kill them once, we'll see how Shining Tiger will continue bringing their members here to grind. The main reason the Eastern Continent's native superpowers continued to survive was their Tier 4 experts leading teams into Forbidden Lands to grind. Killing the native superpowers Tier 4 experts once would be more than enough to deal a heavy blow to the native superpowers, especially if the death penalty players suffered were increased. While EXP meant very little to Tier 4 players, it was a different story for weapons and equipment. If Tier 4 experts suddenly lost 2 or 3 pieces of their equipment, the native superpowers would definitely suffer heartache. It would also be very challenging for these native Tier 4 experts to recover from their losses. Understood. At Awakened Abyss's command, the ranger promptly contacted the other members of their hunting group to gather at the specified ambush point. In a woodland in the Demon Mist Valley's outer region. If we continue running in this direction for another 4 to 5 hours, we should be able to leave the Demon Mist Valley, 16th Cloud said excitedly as she pointed at a mountain range looming in the distance. The Demon Mist Valley's terrain continuously changed. The one constant in this place was the mountains. Meanwhile, the distant mountain range was none other than the 1/16th Cloud's party had passed through to enter the Forbidden Land. The sight of this same mountain range meant that their journey was nearing its end. Once they left the Demon Mist Valley, they could teleport to safety using a return scroll. At that time, the outer world invaders wouldn't be able to chase them. Sorrowful Silence and the Tier 4 Guardian Knight also grew excited when they saw the distant mountain range. The 3 of them had been inflicted with a curse that drastically increased the death penalty they suffered and would randomly resurrect them within the Forbidden Land. Previously, they thought that they no longer had any hope of surviving this ordeal. Now, their hopes were rekindled. It would have been incredibly difficult for their party of 3 to escape the outer region by themselves. After all, the outer region had not only outer world players hunting them but also powerful monsters roaming everywhere. If they got entangled with monsters for too long, the resulting commotion would definitely attract the outer world players to them. However, when following Xiaofan's party of 4, they actually did not encounter a single monster. It was as if those monsters had vanished from the map. They had to marvel at Xiaofan's party's heaven-defying luck. Now, all they needed to do was run to that distant mountain range. After that, they would be able to fly freely in the sky like birds. However, when the 7 arrived at the foot of the mountain range, a magic barrier suddenly enveloped them. Given its 1,000-yard radius, one could easily tell that it was at the master standard. Even superior mythic monsters would have difficulty breaking out of it. Not good. We got fooled. 16th Cloud's complexion paled when she saw the barrier forming. She had thought that they had already shaken off the outer world players' pursuit. Evidently, these outer worlders had simply waited for them to throw themselves into this trap. With this area sealed with a master magic barrier, they had no hope of escaping whatsoever. Just then, a savage and brawny level 145 man emerged from the forest in front of Xiaofang's group and said with a sadistic look, "You people have made me wait for a very long time. Let's see how you get out of this situation now." The last time his hunting group had come across Shining Tiger's party, it should have succeeded in annihilating the trio. However, the instant 16th Cloud noticed the ambush, she had decisively fled with her party before his hunting group could trap them with a barrier. This time, his hunting group had discovered traces of 16th Cloud's party early and managed to discern where the party was heading. And with this information, his hunting group could easily set up an ambush. At this time, 16th Cloud couldn't help looking at Xiaofan with guilt. Guild leader Black Flame, this is all my fault. If I had suggested we take another exit, they wouldn't have caught us. The Demon Mist Valley didn't have just one exit. Had they chosen any of the other exits instead, they wouldn't have gotten trapped. Vice Commander Cloud, you don't need to blame yourself, Xiaofan said, shaking his head. After all, I was the one who asked you to find the nearest exit. Even if you didn't guide us, we would have had to clean up these hindrances sooner or later. Upon hearing Xiaofang's words, the approaching brawny man automatically frowned. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU, clean up us hindrances? What big words you have there. Commander Eagle, why are you wasting time speaking with these people? These ignorant natives just don't know how large the gap between them and us is. Let's just get rid of them now. Feng's words enraged the Outer World players surrounding his party. In their opinion, the residents of this god's domain were no different from natives living in an undeveloped wilderness. Yet, these natives weren't kneeling and begging them for mercy but even treating them like annoying flies. Such arrogance was beyond salvation. However, while the Outer World hunting group's 30+ Tier 4 experts and 100+ Tier 3 experts were raising a ruckus, the brawny man leading them turned his gaze toward Awakened Abyss's group. "Commander Abyss, you're finally here. May I know if your group will be taking action, or will you leave it to us?" Chapter 2862, Hunter? Or Hunted? Quasi-Eagle's words agitated the Tier 4 experts around him so much that they wished they could charge forward and finish off the 7 native players in front of them immediately. Currently, the Alliance's price for native Tier 4 experts was 300 contribution points per kill. If a curse was used on the kill, they would receive 1,000 points. These prices represented a fortune, even for the luxury zone's residents, let alone residents of the commoner zone like themselves. If converted into income, 1,000 Alliance contribution points were equivalent to 10 years of salary for an ordinary person living in the luxury zone. Indeed, the Interstellar Alliance's bounty for native Tier 4s was that high. This demonstrated the Interstellar Alliance's determination in acquiring this god's domain. More importantly, Alliance contribution points could be exchanged for money but not vice versa. Meanwhile, Alliance contribution points could be used to exchange for many items and resources that normally could not be bought with money. Hence, the 7 Tier 4 players in front of them were basically walking treasure troves. Even if they split the points among their group, they would still earn a significant income. However, Awakened Abyss did not respond to Quasi-Eagle's question. Instead, he stared at the group of native players in front of him. More precisely, he was looking at the cloaked man standing at the head of this group. Despite being surrounded by over 100 Tier 4 combatants and suppressed by a master magic array, this cloaked man remained incredibly calm. Guild leader Black Flame. "You've really made me search for you." Awakened Abyss ignored everyone around him, focusing solely on Feng, the words he uttered carrying endless rage and killing intent. Although Awakened Abyss had eventually gotten rescued from Sky Springs City's prison, his reputation in the guild had still plummeted. As a result, despite being one of the guild's top 3 talents, he had no choice but to complete a bunch of meaningless missions, such as hunting down Shining Tiger's Tier 4 experts. Hence, Awakened Abyss bore deep hatred for Feng. Only, after the world passage opened, he had not obtained any information on Feng's whereabouts, so he had no opportunity to reclaim his honor. However, Feng ignored Awakened Abyss's anger and hatred entirely. Looking at the young man, Feng said calmly, "So, it's Commander Abyss of 100 Ghosts. It seems you've improved a lot since we last met." Awakened Abyss was evidently much stronger than when Feng saw him in Sky Springs City. The young man had not only reached level 145 but even broken through the 100% threshold of his mana body. His mana body's completion rate definitely rivaled Phythalia's. Most importantly, aside from sporting epic set equipment, Awakened Abyss also had 3 fragmented legendary items on him. Given that he was at the domain realm and had gotten far in the realms of truth, the combat power he could display was most likely superior to the average Tier 4 NPCs. "That's right. This is all thanks to you, Guild Leader Black Flame." Awakened Abyss gnashed his teeth at Feng's words. "Since we had the fortune of meeting today, how about we, 11?" Just as Awakened Abyss was about to propose a duel, Jade Leaf hurriedly tugged his sleeve and said quietly, "Abyss, don't mess around. His strength has already reached monstrous levels. Moreover, the Elder told you that now still isn't the time for us to make an enemy of Black Flame." Awakened Abyss had been imprisoned in Sky Springs City, so he had not witnessed the battle outside the Secret Covenant Tower. Back then, not only did Feng single-handedly slay hundreds of weakened Tier 4 foe Saint Saboteurs as if he was cutting up a bunch of vegetables, but he also revealed extraordinary trump cards. Feng also possessed an incredibly powerful mana domain. When he deployed his mana domain, none of the faux Saint Saboteurs managed to exhibit more than half of their usual combat power. While one of the reasons Wind Shadow had chosen to surrender to Zero Wing was indeed the mobile fortress's threat, a larger part was Feng's trump cards. Hence, he had chosen to surrender and compensate Zero Wing. Although their hunting group currently had a significant advantage in numbers and even had a master magic array suppressing Feng, Jade Leaf still couldn't see their group having any chance of victory against Feng's party. At Jade Leaf's reminder, Awakened Abyss gradually cooled down. I know. Although Awakened Abyss wanted nothing more than to kill Feng right now, his circumstances were no longer the same as before. He could no longer afford to act willfully. Take Jade Leaf, for example. In addition to protecting him, she was also tasked with supervising him. If Awakened Abyss dared defy Wind Shadow's command and Jade Leaf reported his disobedience, it wouldn't matter whether he managed to kill Feng or not, nothing good would come of it. In fact, he might get even more marginalized in the guild. After Awakened Abyss finished his conversation with Jade Leaf, he turned to Quasi-Eagle. Commander Eagle, remove the barrier. We're leaving. At Awakened Abyss's words, Quasi-Eagle and the other Tier 4 experts of the hunting party were all stunned. What's going on? 16th Cloud also goggled in shock. She couldn't understand why the situation had taken such an unexpected turn. While she wasn't aware of the history between Awakened Abyss and Feng, she could tell from the anger and hatred Awakened Abyss had displayed toward Feng a moment ago that Awakened Abyss wouldn't let them go. In fact, it was already incredible that Awakened Abyss did not take action immediately. Yet, Awakened Abyss was now saying to let them go. When Awakened Abyss heard these mercenaries' words, he had an urge to puke blood. When did I become friends with Black Flame? Despite his anger at the mercenaries' comments, Awakened Abyss was actually delighted about this situation. In fact, he wished these mercenaries would blow up this situation even further. At that time, even if the higher-ups of his guild wanted to pin the blame on him, they couldn't. Although Awakened Abyss was slightly displeased that he wouldn't get revenge with his own hands, watching Feng get killed wasn't a bad option either. Jade Leaf, on the other hand, frowned at this sight. She never thought that these mercenaries would be so crazy. These mercenaries were treating a monster like Feng as an average Tier 4 expert under the command of the native superpowers. Instead of conducting detailed research on the man, the only thing they had in their minds was money. Jade, you saw it yourself. I tried to let him go, but these people aren't willing to do so. There's nothing I can do about this. Pretending to be angry, Awakened Abyss said, these mercenaries simply aren't treating me like their leader at all. That's why I've been saying that I'm not suited to leading these mercenaries. After this mission, you must talk to Elder Wind Shadow for me. Forget it. We're leaving. Jade Leaf couldn't be bothered with these mercenaries. The instructions of the guild's higher-ups were simple. They were to avoid making an enemy out of Zero Wing, no matter what, for the moment. However, since they had no control over these mercenaries, the higher-ups naturally couldn't blame them for negligence if the mercenaries acted on their own. Jade Leaf promptly drew 100 Ghosts' members aside, refusing to participate in this affair. Good. Seeing Jade Leaf moving away, Quasi-Eagle smiled and said, brothers, time to work. Make sure not to show too ugly of a scene to our dear Commander Abyss. The other mercenaries present laughed, all them gazing at Feng's group with ill intentions. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Friends, don't blame us for this. We're only doing this to make a living. For our sake, I'll have to trouble you to suffer a little bit. Quasi-Eagle said as he looked at Feng's group of 7, his eyes radiating killing intent. Trouble? Feng chuckled. It seems you people have made a mistake. Mistake? Quasi-Eagle eyed Feng strangely. What mistake? You've mistaken the roles of the hunter and the hunted in this situation. After saying so, Feng extended his mana domain, instantly enveloping a 2,000-yard radius in his mana and shattering the magic barrier trapping the seven. Chapter 2863, Peerless Overlord World Creation? How is this possible? 16th Cloud gaped in shock when she saw the magic barrier disappear and the pressure weighing down her body vanished. She simply couldn't bring herself to believe this situation. Even acquiring a mana domain was already tough for Tier 4 players. Anyone who managed to do so would become an absolute powerhouse among Tier 4 existences. Meanwhile, world creation was something even Tier 5 existences had difficulty achieving. Anyone who reached the world creation standard could create a small world of their own, which was much more powerful than a barrier created using a magic array. It was akin to a passive, large-scale magic barrier. What was even more amazing was that the owner of this small world could isolate enemies from the ambient mana. So long as the trapped enemies had yet to reach Tier 5 or the world creation standard or did not possess fragmented legendary items capable of countering a world creation mana domain, resisting the owner of the small world was impossible. In front of a world creation expert, Tier 4 experts were hardly any different from Tier 2 and Tier 3 players, they just had stronger basic attributes and physiques. Let alone 16th Cloud, even Awakened Abyss and Jade Leaf were stunned by this situation. How can he be at the world creation level already? Isn't he just a native? Awakened Abyss couldn't believe his eyes as he looked at Feng. Even in the gods' domain they came from, only experts standing at the apex of the world had reached the world creation standard, all of them old monsters belonging to the few transcendental powers. However, Feng's appearance indicated he was only 30, at most. Moreover, the gods' domain he lived in was not only sparse in mana but also lacking in legacies. No matter how Awakened Abyss looked at it, there was no way anyone in this god's domain could achieve such strength at this stage of the game. So, this is his hidden strength? Jade Leaf was horrified by this revelation. Previously, when Wind Shadow told her that Feng was still hiding a lot of his strength and that they needed to be careful around him, she hadn't thought much of his warning. She had reminded Awakened Abyss to avoid clashing with Feng simply because she did not want to disobey Wind Shadow's orders. However, after Feng revealed his hidden strength, Jade Leaf found him much scarier than even Wind Shadow's predictions. The next moment, before Quasi-Eagle and the other mercenaries could snap out of their daze, Feng's Light of Two Worlds swung toward them. Tier 4 skill, Lightning Edge. Countless sword lights descended from the sky, creating a mesmerizing river of light. Quasi-Eagle and the other mercenaries indeed possessed combat power at the Tier 4 standard. Moreover, even the weakest Tier 3 expert among them was at the Refinement Realm standard. However, since they couldn't tap the ambient mana, none of the defensive maneuvers and life-saving skills they used could withstand Feng's attack. As a result, apart from Quasi-Eagle and a Tier 4 Elementalist, both of whom had broken through the 100% threshold of their mana bodies, everyone else lost their lives to the sword lights. When the river of light disappeared, a ravine dozens of meters deep and nearly 1,000 meters long had formed in the forested region, with weapons and equipment strewn inside it. How is this possible? Quasi-Eagle, who had survived thanks to a Tier 4 defensive skill, was stupefied when he saw most of his team of more than 100 Tier 4 combatants wiped out. When he and the surviving Elementalist looked at Feng again, they shuddered involuntarily, horror swamping their hearts. The two of them finally understood that what Feng had said earlier was true. From start to end, their team had merely been a bunch of clowns. They arrogantly thought of Feng's group as sheep for the slaughter, not knowing that they themselves were the actual sheep. World creation. No wonder Awakened Abyss conceded without hesitation. Quasi-Eagle smiled bitterly as he looked at Feng. The loss of levels was a small matter for Tier 4 players like them. However, the loss of weapons and equipment wasn't something that they could recover from easily. "Boss, what should we do?" the level 144, Tier 4 male elementalist asked Quasi-Eagle in a panic. "There's no way we can get away from him inside this small world. We also can't fly inside the Demon Mist Valley." Once a world creation expert unleashed their mana domain, escape was impossible, especially for players like themselves. At the elementalist's question, Quasi-Eagle gritted his teeth and said to Xiaofan, "Friend, my brother and I surrender. We are willing to compensate you with 2 pieces of top-tier epic equipment for each of us. What do you think?" Quasi-Eagle's proposal surprised Awakened Abyss and the other 100 Ghosts members. The commander of the Wild Hunt mercenary group was considered above average among the Tier 4 experts in their god's domain. For him to actually bow down to another was simply unbelievable. Quasi-Eagle was known to be a ruthless person in their god's domain. He had once gone up against a guild all by himself. Despite getting killed more than a dozen times, he still did not give up clashing with the guild. Eventually, the guild in question suffered a major loss in a guild war. And with Quasi-Eagle incessantly targeting the guild's experts, the guild had no choice but to concede and provide all sorts of compensation to Quasi-Eagle to put this feud to rest. This incident had spurred Quasi-Eagle's rise to fame. He had then gone on to establish the present Wild Hunt mercenary group, which had a reputation as a pack of mad dogs in their god's domain. Yet, Quasi-Eagle was actually taking the initiative to admit defeat after suffering such a small setback. How could Awakened Abyss and the others not find this situation surprising? Unfortunately, Feng showed no interest whatsoever in Quasi-Eagle's proposal. 3 pieces. We'll pay 3 pieces of epic equipment each. Quasi-Eagle said, gritting his teeth. Even if you kill us, the most we will drop is 2 items each. Top-tier epic equipment is rare even in the present god's domain. This is definitely a worthwhile transaction for you. Normally, Quasi-Eagle wouldn't have minded getting killed. However, he currently had a precious treasure on his person, and it had a certain chance of dropping upon death. It was precisely thanks to this treasure that he had managed to break through his mana body's 100% threshold. Meanwhile, this was only the tip of the iceberg of what this treasure had to offer. Although he didn't know what exactly this treasure was, since it had such an ability, it was definitely more valuable than even fragmented legendary items. He naturally wouldn't dare bet on the chance that it wouldn't drop. Hence, he endured the humiliation of surrendering. However, before Quasi-Eagle could finish speaking, Feng had already slashed out with the abyssal blade. First sword, Light Shadow. You lunatic. When Quasi-Eagle and the elementalist saw the towering greatsword descending toward them, they promptly activated another life-saving skill. The 2 of them then fled in different directions, neither daring to receive the descending greatsword. They could clearly sense the frightening power the illusory greatsword carried. This attack was most likely much stronger than even that of superior mythic monsters. Receiving it would be suicide. 1 slash. 2 slashes. 3 slashes. As Quasi-Eagle and the Tier 4 elementalist used up one life-saving skill after another, Feng executed Light Shadow time and again. After 5 consecutive slashes, Quasi-Eagle and the elementalist finally fell to the illusory greatsword and transformed into ashes, each of them dropping 2 items as they died. This scene rendered Awakened Abyss and Jade Leaf speechless for a long time. So, this is the power of world creation? 16th Cloud similarly found herself at a loss for words when she saw Quasi-Eagle getting killed in just a few moves. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Her party of 3 had previously clashed with the mercenary commander. Despite the 3 of them working together to fight him, they were still at a disadvantage. Yet, Feng had overwhelmed Quasi-Eagle and another Tier 4 expert, who had also broken through the 100% threshold of his mana body, so much that the 2 couldn't even retaliate. Afterward, Feng collected the loot from Wild Hunt, then glanced at 100 Ghosts' group. Awakened Abyss and the dozen or so Tier 4 experts around him shuddered involuntarily. A few of them even stumbled 2 steps back. Feng turned to 16th Cloud and the others. Let's go. Leaving behind the petrified members of 100 Ghosts, Feng led 16th Cloud and the others straight out of the Demon Mist Valley. Chapter 2864, Astonishing Zero Wing, He's Finally Gone. Jade Leaf heaved a deep sigh of relief when Feng's group disappeared into the distance. Previously, she thought that Feng would take action against them. Although they weren't afraid of getting killed, losing equipment would still impact them to a certain extent. Black Flame. Awakened Abyss glared at the distant sky. Just you wait. I'll get back at you one day. Although Feng was indeed powerful, he wasn't an invincible existence. This was especially true in the War of Worlds. Let alone Tier 4 world creation experts, even Tier 5 NPCs were incapable of stopping their invasion. Otherwise, so many kingdoms on the eastern continent wouldn't have fallen so soon after the War of Worlds began. Now, while it might seem like both sides had reached a balance, they were merely accumulating their strength. Moreover, it wouldn't be long before the next large-scale operation began. Abyss, you'd better not mess around. Black Flame is much scarier than we initially expected. If you disrupt the Alliance's plans, even Elder Windshadow won't be able to protect you, Jade Leaf warned. What we need to do now is notify the Elder about Black Flame as soon as possible. Although a peerless overlord like Feng couldn't affect the overall situation of the war between the two gods' domains, he could still affect the outcome of some war theaters. I know. Awakened Abyss nodded. After this operation, I'll return to headquarters and apply for a trial slot. You'll apply for the trial now? Isn't it too soon? Jade Leaf asked in surprise. The god's domain they came from was different from this god's domain. Their world had plenty of legacies. One of the more valuable legacies 100 Ghosts possessed was an ancient trial, and the entry slots for this trial were generally reserved for the guild's top talents. However, while this ancient trial could provide significant growth to players, it also came with significant risks. Failure would put players' souls into a weakened state for a long period. Moreover, every top talent in the guild had only one opportunity to challenge this trial. If I can improve my strength now, I can earn more contribution points in the upcoming war. So long as I accumulate enough points, I can just exchange for another trial slot. Awakened Abyss had long considered challenging the ancient trial. The Interstellar Alliance was adamant in acquiring the Eastern Continent, hence, it had offered incredibly lavish rewards to those willing to contribute to this cause. With his status as one of 100 Ghosts' peerless geniuses, acquiring another slot for future use wouldn't be difficult so long as he made enough contributions in the war. His only problem was that he needed to achieve world creation in this trial. Previously, Awakened Abyss had only heard rumors regarding the strength of world creation, but he hadn't known exactly how powerful the ability to create a small world was. However, after seeing Feng's battle, he finally understood the power of world creation. This was why he had decided to challenge the trial ahead of time. Arctic Canyon, Zero Wing City. Several bright flashes appeared above the teleportation array inside Zero Wing City's teleportation hall as Feng's party of 7 teleported into the city. So, this is Zero Wing City? 16th Cloud was astonished when she arrived inside the teleportation hall. What incredibly dense mana. Although she had long since heard rumors that Zero Wing City's mana was extraordinary, she found that the city was even more amazing than the rumors had depicted it to be. Zero Wing City was bustling with people. All sorts of NPC merchants and NPC nobles were walking down the street outside the teleportation hall. She spotted even Tier 4 NPCs wandering the city. If not for her coming to Zero Wing City to sign a partnership contract with Zero Wing on behalf of Shining Tiger, she would have never realized that Zero Wing City was such an amazing place. Phythalia, McCaffrey, and Crimson Witch were also shocked by the city. Not only did Zero Wing City possess superior mana to the Starlight Fortresses, but its security standard was also incredible. There were even Tier 4 NPCs patrolling the city. Zero Wing City's security standard was something no other guild city in God's domain could even imagine having. While the various superpowers boasted Tier 4 NPCs of their own, these NPCs were personal guards the various superpowers nurtured. The superpowers treated every one of these NPCs as their most precious combatants, normally using them to defend entire towns or cities single-handedly. However, in Zero Wing City, Tier 4 NPCs were actually tasked with leading patrol squads. Moreover, there wasn't just one such patrol squad patrolling the city streets but many. The Tier 4 NPCs that were precious in the eyes of the various superpowers were no different from cabbages in Zero Wing City. Xiaofan, though, did not find this situation particularly surprising. Zero Wing City was currently the only main guild city in God's domain. It was even situated in the Arctic Canyon, a high-level neutral map. The number of Tier 4 NPCs seeking to develop themselves here would naturally be significant. Hence, Zero Wing City could recruit a group of Tier 4 NPCs to serve as soldiers. Not to mention, Zero Wing City's mana environment rivaled that of the ancient God's domain, making the city even more attractive to Tier 4 NPCs. After all, if one wished to develop themselves further, one would need to improve one's understanding of mana. However, Xiaofan had to admit that Zero Wing City had truly made significant progress while he was gone. Not only had the strength of the city's NPC soldiers improved, but even the players occupying the city had grown stronger. Now, the players here were all Tier 3 or above, with even the lowest leveled among them at level 136. He had even noticed quite a few Tier 4 players in the city. On the way from the teleportation hall to Zero Wing's residence, Xiaofan had spotted more than 10 Tier 4 players, which meant that Zero Wing City was even more prosperous than the Starlight Fortress. After all, any player capable of entering Zero Wing City now was a member of either Zero Wing or one of the guild's partners, and this drastically reduced the number of players capable of entering the city. Apart from that, the number of Zero Wing's members present in the city had reached an incredible number. When Zero Wing City was first opened after its promotion to main city, only several tens of thousands of Zero Wing members had entered it. Yet, according to the information Xiaofan received from the guild residents, there were more than 500,000 Zero Wing members in the city now. Given that one needed to be at least Tier 3 to operate around Zero Wing City, Zero Wing currently had at least 500,000 Tier 3 players under its command. This number definitely surpassed that of ordinary superpowers by a large margin and rivaled what super guilds had. Guild leader, this is our guild's latest development report, Liang Jing said with a hint of pride as she handed Xiaofan a statistics report. Although a lot of things had occurred on the eastern continent during Xiaofang's absence, because of the mobile fortress and 3 guild cities, Zero Wing managed to hurdle most of these problems. In fact, during the War of Worlds, Zero Wing City had practically become a shelter that all players sought to enter. Many annihilated guilds and wandering adventurer teams had chosen to join Zero Wing, which resulted in Zero Wing's member count skyrocketing. If not for resource limitations, the guild's member count would have most likely doubled by EBA now. /be amazing. Xiaofan was astounded when he read the numbers on the report. At present, Zero Wing's total Tier 3 member count already exceeded 800,000, more than 500,000 of which were operating in Zero Wing City. The rest were operating in Stone Forest City, Silverwing City, and the Mobile Fortress. However, this still wasn't the most astonishing part. What was more important was that Zero Wing now had 73 Tier 4 players under its command. This number was even higher than what the average super guild had. For a moment, Xiaofan even wondered if he had returned to the wrong guild. After all, super first-rate guilds currently had only a dozen or so Tier 4 players, with stronger ones having 20. Super guilds had only around 30 or 40. Only existences like the 5 great super guilds had over 70 Tier 4 experts. Moreover, according to Liang Jing's report, Zero Wing still had over 40 players stuck inside their respective Tier 4 legacy lands, and half of them were expected to succeed in their promotion. In other words, Zero Wing would soon have over 100 Tier 4 experts under its command. Of course, the main reason Zero Wing could produce such frightening numbers was Zero Wing City's environment. The environment here allowed players to continuously improve their knowledge of and control over mana. Looking at Xiaofan's surprised expression, Liang Jing suggested, "Guild leader, several more outer-world superpowers arrived on the Eastern Continent recently, and some of the Eastern Continent superpowers got annihilated as a consequence. I think we should absorb the Tier 3 and Tier 4 players of these fallen superpowers. Since our income of resources has reached a bottleneck, and we can support only so many guild members with what we currently have, I wish to open Zero Wing City further. With the city's advantages, we can easily acquire even more resources. Then, we can recruit more experts into Zero Wing." Feng nodded in agreement with Liang Jing's suggestion. The War of Worlds was indeed a scary event, but it was also a good opportunity for development. This was because the moment the world passage opened, the players of the two gods' domains were enemies. Not only were players from the two gods' domains incapable of adding each other as friends, but they couldn't communicate with each other through the system either. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. In addition, players of the two worlds could kill each other without accumulating any crime value. In fact, native players would even receive gifts and EXP from killing outer world players, albeit significantly lower EXP than the EXP awarded for killing monsters and NPCs. Most importantly, native players couldn't join outer world guilds and vice versa. Hence, native forces were the only option available to members of fallen superpowers. We should indeed open Zero Wing City further to the public. Smiling, Feng added, "Before that, though, we still need to do something." "We still need to do something?" Liang Jing parroted in confusion. In her opinion, Zero Wing had already done everything possible and reached its current development limit. To expand its forces further, the only option it had was to open up Zero Wing City. As for Zero Wing's other territories, developing them any further was impossible at present. "That's right." Nodding, Feng took out a document and said, "Prepare the materials on this list for me. I need them immediately." Further opening Zero Wing City to the public was a must. However, before doing so, he needed to complete the Intercontinental Teleportation Array. With it, the city's opening would generate much better results. Chapter 2865, Special Loot. After Liang Jing left the room to prepare the listed materials, Feng finally had time to sort through the loot from the outer world players. Even the weakest among Quasi-Eagle's group was a Tier 3 player with Tier 4 combat power, so they all possessed excellent equipment, especially those Tier 3 players. If he could gather a complete set of their equipment, he would be able to increase Zero Wing's number of Tier 4 combatants by 1. As Feng inspected the loot, he couldn't help feeling some awe at the outer world players' equipment. Every one of those Tier 3 experts was actually geared in Tier 3 mana set equipment. In the current God's domain, a full set could easily sell for over 10,000 gold. However, compared to the Tier 4 experts' loot, the Tier 3 experts' loot was inferior by a large margin. Even the worst item dropped by the Tier 4 outer world players was level 150 epic equipment. Some of them had even dropped parts of epic set equipment. Judging by the loot, Feng could say with certainty that these Tier 4 outer world players were using full sets of epic set equipment. Even the current Zero Wing didn't have epic set equipment. Setting aside how rare epic set equipment was, even if one found a way to obtain a set, one would still have to expend an incredible amount of time and manpower to acquire the full set. After all, there was no way to gather a full set just by killing one type of boss monster. One would have to kill multiple types of bosses. Moreover, these bosses were not guaranteed to drop the equipment one desired. In other words, if one didn't kill a large number and variety of bosses, gathering a complete set of epic set equipment would be impossible. Meanwhile, killing a bunch of level 150 mythic ranked bosses was a task that required a large number of tier 4 players. Of course, one part of an epic set equipment from the Outer World players didn't prove anything. However, Feng didn't have just one part but 5. Moreover, this was merely the loot he got from killing tier 4 experts of an Outer World mercenary group. He could easily imagine how excellent the equipment of the Outer World superpowers tier 4 experts was and how many tier 4 experts these superpowers possessed. Otherwise, it would be impossible for a measly mercenary group to gather so much epic set equipment. No wonder the Eastern Continent's superpowers are powerless to retaliate. In terms of equipment standards alone, they are already behind by more than half a year. Not to mention, there is also the massive difference in the number of tier 4 experts. Feng's head ached as he looked at the items before him. Originally, he thought that the difference between Earth's God's domain and the interstellar continent's God's domain lay only in the number of tier 4 experts and combat techniques they possessed. Now, he found that there was a massive gap even in weapons and equipment. He had to admit that the threat level of the Outer World's players and forces exceeded his expectations. After all, even now, Zero Wing could manufacture only individual pieces of epic equipment. Moreover, the production volume was incredibly low since only a handful of players could make them. And worse, according to the statistics report regarding Zero Wing's tier 4 members, less than 30% of them were currently equipped with 5 or more pieces of level 150 epic equipment. The rest had only 3 or so pieces of level 150 epic equipment on average. As for epic set equipment, dream on. Zero Wing's tier 4 experts had that many pieces of level 150 epic equipment mainly because of the Arctic Canyon. In addition, Yenya and Cleansing Whistle had returned from the ancient god's domain with a large number of level 150 epic equipment. If not for these factors, Zero Wing's tier 4 experts would be even more poorly equipped right now. However, it wasn't exactly accurate to describe Zero Wing's tier 4 experts as poorly equipped. At the very least, they were much better equipped than the native superpowers tier 4 experts. They were only inferior when compared to the Outer World's tier 4 experts. It seems I'll have to start acquiring some top-tier epic weapons and equipment once I finish setting up the Intercontinental Teleportation array. Otherwise, even if we have enough tier 4 experts, we still won't be able to go up against the Outer World's superpowers. While it was indeed important for one to acquire legacy guidances and improve one's control over mana after reaching tier 4, that didn't mean one could just ignore one's weapons and equipment. After all, there was at least a 20% difference in basic attributes between a full set of disparate epic equipment and a full set of epic set equipment. This difference would become even more significant with amplification by skills and mana control. After Feng finished inspecting the weapons and equipment dropped, he set his sights on a shabby, crystalline statue. When he inspected the statue, though, he was stunned. An eternal item? No matter how he looked at the crystalline statue, it appeared ordinary. Yet, when he tried inspecting it, he actually failed to get any information. All he got was a bunch of unknowns. Moreover, when he carefully spread his senses around the statue, he felt an urge to devour this statue, just like when he received the World Stone from Phoenix Rain. Immediately, Feng activated Omniscient Eyes to identify the statue. Due to his mana body having reached the 120% threshold, Omniscient Eyes took less than 30 seconds to finish the appraisal. Origin Statue, Eternal Item, Effect 1, Guides the Principle of All Things. Effect 2, Indestructible Object. Guides the Principle of All Things. Xiaofan was momentarily confused by the item description. The World Stone's description stated that it could stabilize the principle of all things. It had allowed him to log in and out of the game freely while in the ancient god's domain. However, what did the system mean by guiding the principle of all things? Just as Xiaofan was wondering about the origin statue's function, Liang Jing contacted him. Guild leader, I've prepared the materials you asked for. I can have them delivered to the teleportation hall now. Okay. I'll head over right away. At Liang Jing's report, Xiaofan stopped studying the origin statue in his hand. After casually storing it in his bag, he hurried to the teleportation hall to strengthen the existing teleportation array. Only with the modification could the teleportation array manipulate enough mana to connect with the Western Continent spatial node and form a stable teleportation channel. And once a stable channel was established, easy travel between the two continents would become possible. He would no longer have to trouble himself with searching for unreliable ancient teleportation arrays. Zero Wing City, Battle Arena. The battle arena covered an area of several sports stadiums. Presently, the establishment was crowded with players, and even Tier 4 players were waiting in line to reserve a combat room. The liveliness here was even more exaggerated than the auction houses of imperial capitals. Looking at McCaffrey and Crimson Witch, who had just exited a combat room, Vithalia asked curiously, "Afray, what do you think of the combat room's effects?" Initially, they had visited the Eastern Continent to assist Zero Wing and deepen the relationship between Divine Tribe and Zero Wing. However, after experiencing Zero Wing City's mana, they couldn't suppress their curiosity about the effects of training in such an environment. Hence, they came to this place to sate their curiosity. After all, the battle arena was the only place in Zero Wing City that allowed players to do combat. How should I put it? After pondering for a moment and mentally sorting his words, McCaffrey said, "If the Starlight Fortress's training efficiency is a 10, then this place is above 30. Isn't that too much of an exaggeration?" Vithalia couldn't help feeling skeptical of McCaffrey's evaluation. Although she knew that McCaffrey was an austere person and that Zero Wing City's environment was extraordinary, McCaffrey's evaluation of the city's training effect was simply too exaggerated in her opinion. For players of their caliber, the quality of their training environment would need to be significantly better for them to see any improvements to their training efficiency. Hence, no matter how excellent Zero Wing City's environment was, she couldn't bring herself to believe that someone like McCaffrey would see his training efficiency triple. No. It's not an exaggeration. Commander Vithalia, although the mana here isn't misty, when you start manipulating the ambient mana, you'll discover that its density is actually much greater than the mana mist you find in the outside world, Crimson Witch insisted earnestly. If you fight against an expert of the same caliber in this environment, the insights you can get are on a completely different level. This is especially true for your control over mana. I really don't know how Zero Wing accomplished this. They actually managed to let a guild city have such dense mana. You can even view the operating principles of mana with such high clarity. She's right. If I can train here, I'm confident I can further improve my mana body in less than 10 days, McCaffrey said, nodding. He then looked enviously at the Zero Wing members in the building. The Divine Tribe trio had the fortune of visiting Zero Wing City only because they had followed Xiaofan to the Eastern Continent. If not for Xiaofan granting them access, they wouldn't have been able to enter the city. They also wouldn't have realized how astonishing the city's environment was. Meanwhile, Zero Wing's members could actually enjoy the environment here every day. How could he not envy them? At his current standard, increasing his mana body's completion rate by even 1% was incredibly challenging. Yet, in Zero Wing City, he saw the chance to improve his mana body rapidly. A glimmer appeared in Crimson Witch's eyes as she insisted, "Commander Vithalia, we must recommend establishing a temporary residence in Zero Wing City to the Grand Elders and Guild Leader once we return. It doesn't matter even if we have to pay a significant price." The short-term effects might not be obvious, but the long-term benefits for the guild are absolutely unimaginable. Surpassing the 5 great super guilds might even become possible. Phythalia smiled wryly at Crimson Witch's strong recommendation. I want to, but once the Intercontinental Teleportation Array is activated, I'm afraid it'll become difficult for Divine Tribe to secure a temporary residence. Once Zero Wing's Intercontinental Teleportation Array began operating, so long as the two continent superpowers were not stupid, they would understand just how valuable Zero Wing City was, not to mention the extraordinary mana environment in this place. She could easily imagine how many superpowers would seek to garrison Zero Wing City at that time. No. You can't say that, Commander Phythalia. Looking at Phythalia, McCaffrey suddenly smiled and said, I heard that Black Flame lives in Yuan-Tian City's upper zone. With your family's influence and connections, if you personally paid him a visit, wouldn't he agree to a partnership immediately? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU Phythalia was a potential successor of a powerful family based in the upper zone. Her beauty and figure in the real world were also at the level of toppling nations. If she personally visited someone in the upper zone and sincerely proposed a partnership, hardly anyone in the upper zone would refuse her. Upon hearing McCaffrey's suggestion, Crimson Witch nodded in agreement. You, too. Phythalia sputtered, rendered speechless by her two companions. However, before Phythalia could say anything more, a sudden commotion came from outside the battle arena. Then, the mana in the city grew violent and irritable. When Phythalia and her companions walked out of the lobby, they promptly noticed a tower of light rising from the teleportation hall's direction. Chapter 2866, Astonishing Transformation, It's Done. Feng grew ecstatic as he took in the pillar of light rising from the teleportation array in front of him. Previously, he had indeed been certain that he could strengthen the teleportation array until it could handle enough mana to support a teleportation channel connecting the two continents. However, when he began working, he started to have doubts. After all, the teleportation channel had to span not only the distance between the two continents but also the distance between the western continent's edge and the Starlight Fortress, which was nowhere near the ocean. If the teleportation array didn't have enough mana for this additional distance, it still wouldn't connect with the spatial node in the Starlight Fortress. Fortunately, he succeeded in the end. At this time, Liang Jing called him and asked in a panic, Guild leader, did something happen on your side? A pillar of light suddenly came from the teleportation hall. Right now, everyone in the city is talking about it, thinking that something big happened there. The teleportation hall was an important economic resource for Zero Wing City. At the same time, it was the foundation of the city's prosperity. In the absence of a guild residence and the teleportation array, players could only run to the distant Arctic Canyon. If this were to happen, Zero Wing's partner forces and their members would definitely be less enthusiastic about visiting Zero Wing City. Relax. Everything's fine, Feng said, chuckling. I just completed the teleportation array connecting the two continents. From now on, we can freely teleport to the western continent from the teleportation hall, and there won't be any restrictions on time or head count. We can freely teleport to the western continent? Liang Jing was momentarily stunned, her mind failing to process Feng's words. Her eyes were wide with disbelief as she looked at Feng's face on the screen. Before the World Passage's activation, connecting the two main continents held great importance only in terms of trade. However, after the World Passage opened, battlefields appeared all over the eastern continent, and massacres became common out in the wild. Due to the chaos and constant threats, many of the eastern continent's powers and players sought to develop on the western continent. Unfortunately, there was a limited number of ancient teleportation arrays on the eastern continent. Even among the superpowers, very few could travel between the two continents. Moreover, even these few superpowers could transport only a small number of elites at a time. Now, Xiaofan was telling her that Zero Wing City's teleportation hall could facilitate travel to the Western continent without any restrictions. How could she possibly believe this? If news of this matter were to get out, a tsunami of players would flood Zero Wing City within a day. This function would overturn the situation on the Eastern continent. It was game-changing. Yes. Didn't you propose to open Zero Wing further? Smiling, Feng said, now that the Intercontinental Teleportation Array is completed, you can announce to the public that Zero Wing City will be fully open to the public starting today. Our partner and subordinate forces will enjoy a 70% discount on all teleportations. Originally, he had not intended to fully open Zero Wing City so soon. However, the city's development was astonishing, hitting a bottleneck already. To further spread Zero Wing's influence, he could only fully open Zero Wing City to the public. In this way, Zero Wing could attract an ocean of wealth and resources to Zero Wing City, as well as more expert players to the guild. Fully open the city? Guild leader, isn't this a little too soon? Liang Jing panicked at Feng's words. Zero Wing City's present environment and security standards are already enough to drive many players and superpowers wild. Once news that our teleportation hall is connected to the Western continent spreads, we will definitely become a thorn in the eyes of all forces on the Eastern continent. Even the Outer World's forces will probably go nuts over Zero Wing City. Liang Jing didn't even need to think about what would await Zero Wing City if the city were fully open to the public. It would definitely spark massive changes in the entire Eastern continent, no, the entire God's domain. The intensity of the changes would not be the slightest bit inferior to the World Passage's activation. At that time, Zero Wing would become the focal point of the entire God's domain even if it tried to maintain a low profile. With access to such frightening resources and influence, Zero Wing would soon grow into an existence that could surpass even the 5 great super guilds combined. This definitely wasn't an outcome any superpower native or Outer World would be willing to see. Hence, as long as news of Zero Wing City's full opening spread, Zero Wing would become the common enemy of all native and Outer World superpowers. While Zero Wing had recently grown significantly, it definitely couldn't go up against so many superpowers simultaneously. Not to mention, the Outer World superpowers were existences that had successfully destroyed more than a dozen kingdoms. Moreover, the number of Tier 4 NPCs a kingdom commanded far exceeded Zero Wing's number of Tier 4 experts. The royal capitals of NPC kingdoms had stronger defenses than Zero Wing City, yet these cities had still fallen in the end. Of course, a large part of why these kingdoms had fallen was the Outer World's NPC forces. However, nobody could say for certain that the Outer World's players couldn't guide or cooperate with the Outer World's NPC forces to target Zero Wing. Naturally, Feng understood Liang Jing's concerns. In an earnest tone, he explained, I understand, but this is a problem we will have to face sooner or later. Thus, we should strike while the iron is hot and strengthen Zero Wing in one fell swoop. If we succeed, we'll have a much better chance at contending with the native and Outer World superpowers. Previously, 16th Cloud had provided him with plenty of information regarding the Outer World's various forces. Hence, he understood that the main reason the Eastern continent had yet to fall completely was that only a small portion of the Outer World superpowers and NPC forces had crossed the World Passage. However, as more time passed, more Outer World NPC and player forces were bound to arrive on the Eastern continent. Eventually, Zero Wing would have to go up against these Outer World forces. To put it simply, Zero Wing wasn't in a race against the various forces but against time. Under these circumstances, the guild would naturally be better off developing as quickly as possible. Rather than acquiring small amounts of resources and developing slowly in secret, Zero Wing would be better off going big and developing rapidly while the Outer World's forces were still settling down in the Eastern continent. Not to mention, Zero Wing currently had a lot of partner forces already. With these partners, it wouldn't necessarily be impossible for Zero Wing to go up against the native and outer world superpowers that had yet to develop themselves adequately. This, Liang Jing was momentarily at a loss for words. In her opinion, Feng's decision was simply absurd. However, she didn't have a better suggestion. Relax. I know what I'm doing, Feng consoled when he saw Liang Jing's hesitancy. Just get everything prepared on your side. Also, notify Melancholic and Yulan about this. I'm afraid you three will be very busy in the future. Liang Jing had no choice but to nod helplessly. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Feng had always acted more like a figurehead than an actual guild leader. Although he had laid a massive foundation for the guild, he would leave the guild's daily maintenance and operation to others. Naturally, Liang Jing felt incredibly frustrated by this situation, and she frequently wished she could curse him to his face. Deep down, however, she still felt happy and excited for some inexplicable reason. After disconnecting the call, Liang Jing promptly began making the necessary preparations, while Feng headed to Zero Wing City's City Lord's Mansion. City Lord's Mansion, second underground floor, statue room. At this time, apart from Feng, everybody else had been told to leave the room. Feng had also temporarily removed the entry rights for core members and ordered the 2 Tier 4 fine gold guards outside to prevent anyone from approaching the room. Now that my concentration is at Tier 5, and my understanding of and control over mana have reached their limits, it's about time I tried breaking through to Tier 5. Looking at the ancient beast sculpture in front of him, Feng began constructing an entirely new mana body. Chapter 2867, Promotion to Tier 5. Although Feng had never tried to create a personalized mana body, he was very confident of success, now that he had grasped the basic use of mana's various elements and his mana body had reached a 120% completion rate. After spending close to an hour inside the statue room, Feng finished constructing a brand new mana body. Simultaneously, the sound of a system notification entered his ears. System: the strength of the constructed mana body is at 144% of your current mana body. It is not at the Tier 5 standard. Feng revealed a wry smile as he looked at the system notification. Sure enough, constructing a Tier 5 mana body isn't easy. In his opinion, the new mana body he constructed was perfect. He had thoroughly implemented the basic properties of the various elements of mana into his mana body. He had even built an elemental magic array for each element, making it much easier to manipulate the ambient mana. Hence, he never thought that the strength of the new mana body would be at only 144% of his current mana body. From what he heard in his previous life, the requirement for the constructed Tier 5 mana body would depend on the rank of the player's existing mana body. The higher the rank, the lower the requirement. Take the gold mana body, for example. One would need to construct a mana body that was at least 300% stronger to meet the Tier 5 mana body standard. On the other hand, a bronze mana body's owner would need to reach 500% to get promoted to Tier 5. This was why expert players needed to secure the best mana body possible at Tier 3. This decision didn't just relate to the strength of one's mana. It also served as a massive hurdle to reaching Tier 5. If I didn't meet the requirement even with 144%, it seems I'll need to reach at least 200% to get promoted to Tier 5 with an epic mana body. After pondering for a moment, Feng took out the Sword Saint's legacy he had obtained in the ancient god's domain. He then began accepting the legacy guidance in silence. The mana body he constructed just now was already the limit of his current abilities. In his opinion, there were 3 possible reasons behind his failure to meet the requirements. The first was that his control over mana was insufficient. The second was that his understanding of mana was insufficient. The third was that his understanding of mana bodies was insufficient. Feng felt that his control over and understanding of mana had already reached the limits of Tier 4. It should be impossible to improve on them any further. Not to mention, the Dragon Phantom in the trial had praised his level and even stated that some Tier 5 dragons might not be able to rival him in these two aspects. Hence, these two aspects were unlikely to be his stumbling block. In that case, the problem should lie with his poor understanding of mana bodies. Meanwhile, solving this problem was simple. Previously, he had refrained from accepting the Sword Saint's legacy guidance because he was afraid of wasting it. Back then, he felt that his foundation was still lacking and that he still needed to accumulate more strength. The stronger he became, the greater his harvest from the legacy guidance. However, his foundation had now grown so sturdy that even Tier 5 adult dragons might not be a match for him. It was the perfect moment for him to accept the Sword Saint's knowledge. Following this, time passed rapidly inside the statue room. A flood of information kept pouring into Xiaofan's mind. The more information he browsed through, the brighter his eyes became. Thanks to this information, many of his questions had gotten answered. He also grew increasingly mesmerized by the Sword Saint's knowledge. After the legacy guidance was over, Xiaofan stared at the ancient beast sculpture idly, his mind immersed in the knowledge he gained. While Xiaofan quietly processed the Sword Saint's legacy guidance, a commotion raged in Zero Wing's guild cities. Just a moment ago, Zero Wing had announced that it would open Zero Wing City to the public. All players could teleport to Zero Wing City via Sky Spring City and enter it from the Arctic Canyon. Everyone who received this piece of news found it to be unbelievable. Awesome! This is great! I heard that you could raise your training efficiency by several times inside Zero Wing City. I never thought that Zero Wing would open such an amazing place to the public. That's not all of it. Did you see the levels of Zero Wing's members? Not that long ago, I was at roughly the same level as their Tier 3 members. Now, they're at least 3 levels above me. The grinding speed in the Arctic Canyon is simply ridiculous. Nowadays, no player on the Eastern Continent was unaware of Zero Wing City's existence. However, as Zero Wing had reserved the city for its exclusive use, everyone not affiliated with the guild could only watch in envy from the sidelines. Even the various superpowers were helpless against Zero Wing City. Now that Zero Wing City is open to the public, how could they not feel excited? Less than half an hour after Zero Wing's announcement, practically every native player and player force on the Eastern Continent had found out about it. Fire Wing Empire, Secret Pavilion's headquarters, as the most well-informed transcendental organization in God's domain, the Secret Pavilion was one of the first guilds to learn of Zero Wing City's public opening. It had even found out detailed information, such as Zero Wing City's entrance fee pricing and current player population. Uncle Yuan, it seems Zero Wing finally plans on giving its all. Purple Jade smiled as she read the detailed report in her hands. Looking at Yuan Tianxin, she said, this development will probably make the Eastern Continent's superpowers pretty anxious. At this time, Purple Jade's aura had already undergone a massive transformation. Not only did she give off an otherworldly vibe, but she also exuded an indescribable feeling of sharpness. She was now a level 153, Tier 4 Sword Emperor. The mana she radiated even appeared somewhat misty. If Xiaofan were to see her now, he would be surprised. Zero Wing's development has reached a bottleneck. If the War of Worlds did not take place, it might have been able to continue developing quietly for some time. While sorting through the report spread across his desk, Yuan Tianxin was slightly surprised when reading the news on Zero Wing. However, now that the Outer World players have intruded into the Eastern Continent, Zero Wing has to open Zero Wing City to acquire even more resources if it wants to make any further progress. However, it is also a risky move, given Zero Wing's current state. I initially thought Zero Wing would maintain a low profile for a while longer. Black Flames opening the city as soon as he returned was beyond my expectations. I can't help thinking that he is rushing things a little too much. Yuan Tianxin did not doubt that Feng had opened Zero Wing City to the public because of the Outer World players' invasion. However, while doing so would allow Zero Wing City to develop rapidly, it would also turn the city into an eyesore. The Outer World superpowers were not as easy to deal with as the Eastern continent's native superpowers. Not to mention, the Outer World superpowers definitely would not wish to see the remnant forces of the native superpowers they defeated flocking to Zero Wing's banner and creating a colossal native power. Previously, the Outer World superpowers had refrained from targeting Zero Wing because the latter had always operated like a turtle, limiting its members' activity to the vicinity of its strongholds. With Zero Wing's guild cities and mobile fortresses' immense defensive capabilities, devouring the guild was a very challenging proposition. The guild cities of other superpowers posed much easier targets. However, now that Zero Wing had fully opened Zero Wing City to the public, even a fool could foretell the consequences of this action. With the city's massive advantages, Zero Wing would become the strongest and largest guild on the Eastern continent. Moreover, it wouldn't take long for this future to come to fruition. Given this situation, although Zero Wing was a tough nut to crack, the Outer World superpowers would still choose to annihilate Zero Wing first for the sake of their future. However, unlike Yuan Tianxin, not only did Purple Jade not feel confused by this situation, but it had even ignited her fighting spirit. Uncle Yuan, since you're free right now, why don't we go take a look at Zero Wing City? I've been thinking of visiting guild leader Black Flame. I've improved a lot after returning from that place, but I haven't had a chance to test myself. I can use this chance to ask guild leader Black Flame for some guidance and see which one of us has made greater improvements during this period. After she returned from her training, nobody among the secret pavilion's younger generation could match her. Since she had always set Feng as her target, she was very curious to see whether she could now defeat him and become God's domain's #1 swordsman. Alright. Since you wish to go, I'll go with you. Yuan Tianxin revealed a bitter smile as he took in Purple Jade's spirited look. She had been restless ever since completing her training. However, he also felt that Feng would be a good opponent for the current Purple Jade. Afterward, Yuan Tianxin and Purple Jade departed the secret pavilion's headquarters and teleported to Sky Spring City. While the Eastern continent was in an uproar over Zero Wing City's opening. Inside the City Lord's mansion of Zero Wing City, Feng's eyes opened abruptly. Amazing! As expected of a complete legacy guidance from an ancient sword saint. After processing the sword saint's legacy guidance, Feng finally understood what exactly a complete legacy guidance was. He also understood why Fire Dance would make such significant improvements after experiencing the legacy guidance. The legacy guidance described the properties and usage methods of the various elements of mana in detail and provided a comprehensive introduction to the components and basic applications of the mana body. Although the information provided mainly targeted the swordsman class, it was also beneficial to the other classes. This was especially true for the information on the mana body's components. Of course, if one lacked a good understanding of the fundamental properties of mana's various elements, one would have difficulty understanding all of the information provided. Naturally, one's improvements would also be limited. This was because all of the mana body's basic applications mentioned in the legacy guidance required familiarity with the various elements of mana. My previous considerations for the mana body were too arbitrary. Moreover, they were all modifications based on my existing mana body when the Tier 5 mana body is essentially something completely different. When Feng thought about the mana body he previously created, he couldn't help laughing at his ignorance. Why were Tier 5 entities so much more powerful than Tier 4 entities? It was because Tier 5 existences possessed life ratings far superior to Tier 4 existences. The two couldn't even be considered the same type of creature. Yet, he had foolishly tried to use his Tier 4 mana body as a base for his Tier 5 mana body. His idea was fundamentally flawed. Another reason contributing to a Tier 5 existence's strength was their powerful mana. The mana flowing within their bodies was no longer gaseous or misty, instead, it was liquid. Hence, when constructing a Tier 5 mana body, one had to liquefy their mana. If one couldn't achieve such mana, constructing a Tier 5 mana body would naturally be impossible. After thinking up to this point, Feng began his second attempt at constructing his Tier 5 mana body. Liquefying one's mana might be incredibly difficult for others, but it wasn't an impossible task for a Grandmaster magician like Feng. All he needed to do was integrate a magic array that condensed mana within his mana body. Moreover, he had even identified the magic array for this job. The 12-array magic world. The 12-array magic world was an ancient magic array created by a saint. Although its simplicity meant even master magicians could learn it, Feng felt that this magic array was incredibly powerful, particularly its ability to improve the mana affinity of those within its range. At the very least, such a feat was still beyond him even now. Feng began trying to integrate the 12-array magic world with the mana body he constructed. 1 failure. 2 failures. 3 failures. Time passed rapidly as the number of failures piled up. After an unknown amount of time had gone by with success still nowhere in sight, Feng began to doubt his plan's feasibility. However, just when he considered giving up. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU system, congratulations. You have successfully constructed a new mana body. The constructed mana body's strength is at 336% of your current mana body and has reached the Tier 5 standard. The created mana body is evaluated to be at the epic rank. Do you wish to replace your current mana body with it and get promoted to Tier 5? A Tier 5 epic mana body? Feng was momentarily dumbfounded. He had known that so long as he succeeded, his personalized mana body wouldn't be of low quality, it would reach the gold rank at the very least. However, he never expected that integrating the 12-array magic world into his mana body would yield such an astonishing result. He immediately chose to replace his mana body without hesitation. He had created this mana body out of sheer luck. If he tried recreating it, he wouldn't necessarily achieve a similar standard. Hence, he naturally had to accept it. Chapter 2868, Sword Saint. When Feng chose to replace his existing mana body, the mana within the room practically vanished. His new mana body had drawn even the mana stored within the deep void. Like a hungry beast, his new mana body devoured the mana around it, nourishing itself continuously. This phenomenon lasted for more than a minute before it finally stopped, and the room's mana gradually recovered. Tier 5. So, this is the power of Tier 5? When Feng sensed the frightening power his body exuded effortlessly and the indescribable feeling of omnipotence, he finally understood why even Tier 4 world creation experts couldn't defeat a bona fide Tier 5 existence. He also fully understood the strength and terror of Tier 5 existences. Compared to when he was a Tier 4, the mana flowing inside his mana body was many times denser. The volume of his mana had also increased by more than tenfold. Now, even the world around him was having trouble holding his mana. If even the world of God's domain itself could not withstand the mana of a Tier 5 existence, there was no need to mention the small world created by a Tier 4 world creation expert. Moreover, this wasn't the only factor that made Tier 5 existences powerful. System, congratulations. You have become a Tier 5 Blade Saint, Sword Saint. All basic attributes plus 5,000, all resistances plus 500, mana recovery rate increased by 300%, all physical and magical attacks received that are below Tier 5 will be weakened by 40%, all basic attributes increased by 150%, physique increased by 200%, and reaction speed improved by 100%. Rewarding 200 legacy skill points. He had received a flat increase of only 2,000 points to all basic attributes when he got promoted to Tier 4, yet received a 5,000 point boost for reaching Tier 5. None of his weapons and equipment could provide such a significant amount of basic attributes, not to mention the massive boost to his physique. Right now, even if he replaced all his equipment with bronze equipment, he could still beat up a Tier 4 expert fully geared in epic equipment. In terms of basic attributes, he could match a Tier 4 expert with several pieces of fragmented legendary equipment. Only a legendary weapon could offset this difference. As for legendary equipment, the basic attributes provided would still be slightly insufficient to fill the gap. Of course, basic attributes didn't represent everything. If a Tier 4 expert's combat standards surpassed a Tier 5 expert's, the Tier 4 expert could still emerge victorious in a fight. With this power, I will have no problem fighting even Tier 5 NPCs. After seeing his basic attributes, Xiaofan felt more confident about Zero Wing's future development. His strength and agility attributes both exceeded the 60,000 mark already. Typically, a Tier 4 Berserker fully geared in epic items would have only around 15,000 strength at level 150. And even if the Berserker possessed a top-tier fragmented legendary weapon, the Berserker would only have about 22,000 or 23,000 strength. As for NPCs, according to the research of players in his previous life, a level 180, Tier 5 NPC would have around 70,000 or 80,000 points in their main basic attributes. While Xiaofan was still inferior to Tier 5 NPCs in basic attributes, this difference wasn't impossible to overcome. Moreover, now that he had reached Tier 5, every level up he achieved would significantly boost his basic attributes. With his current equipment, he could easily breach the 80,000 mark once he reached level 180. Not to mention, his combat standards were much superior to the average Tier 5 NPCs. Overall, he was already more than capable of contending with level 180, Tier 5 NPCs. Of course, while he might have the ability to fight Tier 5 NPCs, he wasn't so arrogant as to provoke Tier 5 NPCs. After all, he currently could cope with the most common Tier 5 NPCs, but if a Tier 5 NPC possessed even a single piece of legendary equipment, he would have to avoid them like the plague. It seems I'll have to get Fire and the others to search for some god crystals. In an era where gods had secluded themselves from the world, Tier 5 existences were indeed the apex combatants of God's domain. However, there were still significant differences even among Tier 5s. The possession of legendary weapons and equipment played a vital role in this difference. Only after obtaining a legendary weapon or equipment could a Tier 5 expert enter the leading echelon of Tier 5 existences and walk around God's domain without fear. Such a Tier 5 expert would be an invincible existence short of Tier 6 gods. However, if a Tier 5 expert did not own a legendary weapon or equipment, they would only be second-rate among Tier 5 existences, regardless of any heaven-defying combat standards. While they might be able to contend against Tier 5 experts belonging to the leading echelon, they would never be part of it. Indeed, the difference between having a legendary item and not having one was precisely that massive. In the past, every Tier 5 expert capable of transcending tiers to fight Tier 6 god-ranked experts owned a legendary weapon or equipment, with some even having more than one. If Feng wanted to roam God's domain without fear, obtaining a legendary weapon or equipment was of utmost importance. After Feng familiarized himself with his Tier 5 mana body, he left the statue room. However, when he stepped into the City Lord's mansion's lobby, he was stupefied by the sight that greeted him. People crowded the room to capacity. Apart from the Zero Wing members maintaining order, the other players in the lobby were members of guilds and adventurer teams. These players were lined up in front of the service counters to rent either a shop or a private house in Zero Wing City. They had bloodshot eyes and frantic looks on their faces as they waited in line. BARIL/BBLOI/B if not for the 200 Tier 3 NPCs, 3 Tier 4 NPCs, and many Tier 3 members of Zero Wing maintaining order, a fight would have long since broken out in the lobby. Didn't I tell Liang Jing to raise the rentals for the shops? Did she make a mistake? Feng found this scene very puzzling. Anyone who wasn't a fool could tell how popular Zero Wing City currently was. However, Zero Wing City had limited land. Even if it was now a main city, it still didn't have enough land to satisfy the eastern continent's entire player population. Hence, to maximize Zero Wing's profits, raising rentals was a must. Feng approached one of the service counters to inspect Zero Wing City's shop's rental prices. However, what he saw made him gasp. How ruthless is she? Even a small shop located in Zero Wing City's outer area had a rental of 3,000 magic crystals and 600 gold per week, more than double the price Feng intended. The amount of magic crystals Liang Jing charged was particularly maddening. Ever since the Outer World players invaded the eastern continent, magic crystal production had plummeted, and the various native powers had suffered immensely. In Feng's opinion, renting a small shop in the city's outskirts for 1,000 magic crystals would already be pushing the envelope. Liang Jing's price of 3,000 magic crystals was no different from daylight robbery. As for the shops located on Zero Wing City's main street, the minimum price was 20,000 magic crystals. One couldn't even use coins to offset part of the rent. Moreover, one had to bid for these shops in an auction. Despite these cutthroat prices, players still filled the city lord's mansion's lobby. Feng found this situation utterly unbelievable. For a moment, he even wondered if magic crystals had suddenly depreciated during his seclusion. Just when Feng thought of contacting Liang Jing to ask her about Zero Wing City's situation, he suddenly received a call. The caller was none other than Liang Jing. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU Guild Leader, can I interrupt you for a moment? Liang Jing asked anxiously. Did something happen to Zero Wing City? Feng asked strangely. No, it's just that the secret pavilion's people came to visit. Aside from them, 3 of the 5 great super guilds have sent representatives to us. There are a lot of them, and some of them don't seem to be here with kind intentions, Liang Jing said nervously. They are waiting in the residence's reception room right now, and they say they must meet with you, no matter what. The secret pavilion was a transcendental power, while the 5 great super guilds were godlike existences in the virtual gaming world. If news that 3 of the 5 great super guilds had arrived were to spread, it would cause a sensation. Alright, I got it. I'll head over now. Have them wait for a moment. Feng chuckled when he heard Liang Jing's words, not at all surprised by this situation. After all, the current Zero Wing City was no ordinary city. What would be strange would be these titans of the gaming world not showing any reaction. He immediately left the city lord's mansion and made his way to Zero Wing's residence. Chapter 2869, Apex Gathering Zero Wing Residence, Top Floor Reception Room. As the primary guild residence of a main city, Zero Wing's guild hall was a 30-story tall building almost 200 meters high. One had an unobstructed view of the entire Zero Wing City if one looked out the top floor reception room's windows. Since Zero Wing City was located in a snowland and backed by the endless sea, the view here was unique for players who often operated around NPC cities surrounded by greenery. Unfortunately, none of the dozen or so people currently seated in the reception room showed any interest in admiring this beautiful scenery. Instead, they focused on sizing up each other. Zero Wing City has attracted a lot of bigwigs. Yuan Tiexin was a little shocked as he observed the room's occupants. Mythology's Grand Elder Situ Qing Tian, Netherworld Empire's Grand Elder Nether King Relos, and even the Solar Temple's honorary Elder Qiang Tianhe. It seems these guilds are serious this time. 3 of the 5 great super guilds had sent representatives to Zero Wing City. Moreover, These representatives were all key figures in their respective guilds' management, individuals fully capable of making decisions on behalf of their respective guilds. Usually, meeting even one of these individuals would be challenging. Yet, 3 of them had gathered in Zero Wing City. However, Yuan Tiexin's surprise didn't last too long. After all, Zero Wing had created too huge a scene this time. The 5 great super guilds could no longer ignore it. At this stage of the game, there was probably no guild uninterested in a teleportation array that could facilitate unrestricted travel between the 2 main continents. The ongoing War of Worlds only served to make this intercontinental teleportation array even more precious. If not for another important matter occupying the secret pavilion's guild leader, Yuan Tiexin wouldn't be the one sitting in this room, representing the secret pavilion. Netherworld Empire sure moved fast. It has been active only on the western continent all this time, yet it sent an old guy like the Nether King here, Matt of Mythology said, surprise appearing in his eyes as he looked at a bald old man in a white robe. It hasn't been long since I last met him, yet this old guy's strength has already improved so much. The mana he's radiating has nearly doubled in density. I also see 2 new pieces of equipment on him. That's normal. He wouldn't have given Odin so much trouble if he hasn't made any significant improvements after all this time, Situ Ching Tian, the white-haired old man seated beside Matt, said calmly. He then glanced at the masked young man standing behind Relos and continued, that masked kid behind Nether King, though, is quite something. Although I can't say for certain, he shouldn't be any weaker than Prosciutto. Surprised by Situ Qingtian's assessment, Matt looked toward the masked youth and asked, is he that strong? The silver ghost Prosciutto was already the strongest among mythology's younger generation. Not only did he possess excellent equipment, but his mana body had even exceeded the 110% completion rate already. Now, only a handful of people within the guild could defeat him. After hearing Situ Qingtian's assessment, Cold Shadow, who sat on the elderly man's other side, also looked at the masked youth in surprise. Situ Ching Tian had instructed countless students, and his insight was many times superior to that of youngsters like Matt and herself. Since Situ Ching Tian had given the masked youth such an evaluation, the youth definitely couldn't be underestimated. It's not just that masked kid. The long-haired kid sitting beside Qiang Tianhe isn't any weaker either, Situ Ching Tian said, smiling as he looked at the long-haired, male youth seated some distance away from him. I have to say that times have changed. He looks to be around 26 or 27 years old, yet he has already reached the peak of the domain realm's 2nd step. It's been 3 decades since I last saw such talent. When Situ Ching Tian finished speaking, Cold Shadow was surprised again. Even now, she was barely touching the fringes of the domain realm's 2nd step, and it would still take a lot of time and effort for her to reach it, let alone climb to the peak of the 2nd step. Experts capable of reaching this step were as rare as a phoenix's feather in the virtual gaming industry. If such an expert could take one more step forward, they would become an existence standing at the very apex of God's domain. Situ Ching Tian did not lower his voice when speaking. He also didn't talk through a private channel. Hence, every Tier 4 expert in the reception room heard his words loud and clear. BRO0/B all of the youths present, including Purple Jade and Netherworld Empire's masked youth, turned reflexively to look at the long-haired youth carrying the blood-red greatsword, their eyes full of fighting spirit. Situ Ching Tian, you're still the same gossipy bastard as before. Qiang Tianhe said, glaring at Situ Ching Tian. While our kid has indeed made a breakthrough recently, do you think I can't see through that young lass beside you? If I'm not mistaken, she has at least 4 fragmented legendary items on her, right? As soon as Qiang Tianhe finished speaking, everyone's head snapped toward Cold Shadow. The masked youth and the long-haired youth, in particular, looked at her with fiery gazes. Nowadays, epic weapons and equipment were a lot more common in God's domain. Fragmented legendary items, on the other hand, were still incredibly rare even for the various superpowers. Even in Netherworld Empire and Solar Temple, less than 30% of their Tier 4 experts had even one fragmented legendary item, while their Grand Elders would be fortunate to have 1 or 2 fragmented legendary items. Yet, Qiang Tianhe had revealed that Cold Shadow owned at least 4 fragmented legendary items. How could they not envy her? After reaching their level, every fragmented legendary item could provide them with significant improvements. The total improvement for fragmented legendary items could provide would be massive. This old bastard. Cold Shadow glared at Qiang Tianhe. A display of talent would, at most, make others envious. However, weapons and equipment were a different story. Unlike talent, others could snatch these items. With her current strength, she wouldn't stand a chance if 2 or more of the people present attacked her. After all, every person in the room was a bona fide monster. Looking at Cold Shadow, Qiang Tianhe smiled and asked, "What is it? Do you wish to take action, young lass?" Qiang Tianhe. Glaring at Qiang Tianhe coldly, Situ Qingtian threatened, "Do you think we won't dare make a move?" Immediately, the atmosphere in the room solidified, an indescribable sense of coldness spreading throughout the room. At this development, the members of Mythology and Solar Temple instinctively gripped their weapons. If an ordinary Tier 4 expert were to stand in this heavy atmosphere, they would most likely break out in a cold sweat and flee the scene immediately. What rotten luck! Just what are these people trying to do? Yuan Tianxin grew a little nervous as he looked at the members of the 2 super guilds. Mythologies and Solar Temple's Tier 4 experts were far from ordinary. This was especially true for Situ Qingtian and Qiang Tianhe. A fight between them would be a calamity. The others in the room might even become collateral damage if things got too out of hand. To make matters worse, Netherworld Empire's members also showed signs of restlessness. Evidently, if Mythology and Solar Temple fought, Netherworld Empire wouldn't mind joining in the fray. Just as a fight was about to ensue, the woman standing by the room's door all this time suddenly stepped forward. She was none other than Fire Dance. At this time, not only was Fire Dance at level 155 already, but the quality of the mana she radiated was also much more powerful than when she first entered the statue room. Looking at the members of Mythology and Solar Temple, Fire Dance warned, "Everyone. This is Zero Wing's territory. Fighting is forbidden here. I ask you to show Zero Wing some respect. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU, show Zero Wing respect." Glancing at Fire Dance, Qiang Tianhe said nonchalantly, "Sure. As long as you can get Situ to shut up, I won't have any problems." Not one to fall behind, Situ Qingtian looked at Fire Dance and said, "Young lady, this old man isn't trying to disrespect Zero Wing, but Qiang Tianhe has gone too far. So long as you can get that old ghost to apologize to us, we won't take any direct action." The 2 old men's rejoinders rendered Yuan Tianxin and Purple Jade speechless. Fire Dance was indeed powerful, but she was still slightly weaker than the 2 old men. At most, she could contend against the younger generation of Mythology and Solar Temple. Hence, it was impossible for her to silence the 2 guilds all by herself. Moreover, based on the words spoken by Qiang Tianhe and Situ Qingtian, the 2 of them were clearly trying to make a show of power to Zero Wing. If Fire Dance failed to deal with this situation appropriately, she would make a fool of herself and Zero Wing. However, without any hesitation, Fire Dance calmly told the 2 old men, "If you 2 refuse to give up, then please leave Zero Wing City. Zero Wing does not welcome such guests." Chapter 2870, Feng's sword. Fire Dance's words resounded like thunder in the reception room, causing silence to descend on the room momentarily. Yuan Tianxin and Purple Jade also stared at Fire Dance reflexively. Has she lost her mind? Both Situ Qingtian and Qiang Tianhe were big shots who spoke and acted on behalf of their respective guilds. The two had behaved rudely to show off their power and gain an advantage in their upcoming negotiations with Zero Wing, but Fire Dance's words cornered them. They couldn't back down without harming their reputation. If these two old men got angry for real, the consequences would be unimaginable. Although Zero Wing City had many Tier 4 players and NPCs defending it, if the two old men were intent on making a ruckus, it would take a long time for the city to suppress them. They might even escape capture. After all, this wasn't the first time they had done such a thing. Most importantly, the two of them represented mythology in Solar Temple, two of the 5 great super guilds. Moreover, compared to the other 3, these 2 super guilds held far greater influence on the eastern continent. The 2 guilds might currently be incapable of retaliating against Zero Wing, but as holders of reserve seats for God's Domain's 12 great guilds, they could ruin the Twin Towers Kingdom and Star Moon Kingdom with just a word. Now that the Outer World's forces were rapidly expanding their influence, the NPC kingdoms and empires had limited combat power to spare. As a result, the united army these countries formed couldn't protect every kingdom on the continent. With the resumption of the war imminent, if Mythology and Solar Temple requested the NPC forces not to defend the Twin Towers Kingdom and Star Moon Kingdom, the 2 kingdoms would face swift destruction. Without the support of these 2 kingdoms, even if Zero Wing had Zero Wing City and the ability to teleport between the 2 continents, its income would still plummet. This was because most of the independent players and guild players visiting Zero Wing City could reach the city only via Sky Spring City's teleportation hall. It wasn't possible to teleport to Zero Wing City from other NPC cities. If Sky Spring City disappeared, these players would naturally lose the means to teleport to Zero Wing City. Meanwhile, Zero Wing couldn't garrison any other NPC city at this time. The special rights Zero Wing received from the War God's Temple as a reward from the reserve seat competition were a one-time privilege. If Zero Wing wished to garrison another NPC city, it would have to become a reserve for God's Domain's 12 great guilds. However, this wasn't possible right now. This was also precisely the reason Mythology, a guild that had been suppressing Zero Wing all this time, dared to come to Zero Wing's doorsteps and negotiate for partnership. The next moment, Situ Qingtian and Qiang Tianhe turned to Fire Dance, a hint of coldness and playfulness in their eyes. "Little girl, we traveled a long distance to come to negotiate a partnership with Zero Wing. Is this how Zero Wing treats its guests?" Situ Qingtian asked as he visually inspected Fire Dance. Revealing a faint smile, he continued, "If Zero Wing doesn't wish to partner with Mythology, Mythology will naturally find it unfortunate and frustrating. However, if Zero Wing comes across difficulties in the future, don't blame Mythology for not helping." Situ's words might not sound nice, but they are logical. Qiang Tianhe also looked at Fire Dance and said in a deep voice, "We came here with kind intentions. Now that the Outer World's forces have invaded the eastern continent, only by cooperating will we be able to stop their advance. If we separate on bad terms here, the Twin Towers Kingdom and Star Moon Kingdom will suffer." When Fire Dance heard the 2 elderly men's words, her complexion sank. She never expected the 2 of them to suddenly stand on the same side and work together to pressure Zero Wing. Seeing Fire Dance's grim expression, Situ Qingtian chuckled and said, "I know you have your own difficulties, young lady. I'm sure you just made an unintentional mistake just now. Your words represent only your thoughts, right?" At this time, Situ Qingtian did not dare to truly offend Zero Wing. After all, the benefits of Zero Wing City were too great to pass on. However, he still had to teach Fire Dance a lesson and let her know that she couldn't provoke just anyone in God's domain. Qiang Tianhe, who remained seated, nodded and chimed in, "That's right. There are some things you can't say arbitrarily, little girl. Elders like us might be able to ignore such a transgression, but if it were anyone else, your words would have severe consequences." Nether King Relos shook his head and sighed at this situation. Fire Dance was too young. Because of her inexperience, she had failed to notice that Situ Qingtian and Qiang Tianhe had aimed for such an outcome right from the very beginning. They had deliberately made a commotion in the reception room in the hopes of hooking Fire Dance. Now that she had taken action on Zero Wing's behalf, she was bound to suffer humiliation. Driving away Mythology's and Solar Temple's members wouldn't be possible unless Zero Wing was willing to abandon the prophets of the Twin Towers Kingdom and Star Moon Kingdom. Just when Fire Dance was at a loss as to what to say, the doors to the reception room suddenly opened. A tall figure then entered, looked at Situ Qingtian and Qiang Tianhe, and demanded coldly, "Do you old fools think Zero Wing's main force commander cannot represent Zero Wing? Or do you think Zero Wing is a pushover? I can tell you now that Fire Dance's previous words represent my will. You may leave now." Feng did not speak loudly, but a bone-chilling cold enveloped the entire room at his words. Situ Qingtian and Qiang Tianhe, in particular, were dumbfounded. Even Relos, who had been a spectator all this time, was stunned. He never thought that Feng would chase off Mythology and Solar Temple without any negotiations. Guild leader Black Flame, aren't you going a little too far? Situ Qingtian asked in a cold voice. Our two guilds have come in sincerity. Are you going to abandon the Twin Towers Kingdom and Star Moon Kingdom just because of a little girl's few words? At this time, Qiang Tianhe interjected hurriedly, Guild leader Black Flame, must you take things so seriously? We were merely making a joke. Abandonment is a joke? Looking at the two elderly men before him, Feng sneered, you two think too highly of yourselves. I'll give you 5 seconds to leave. Otherwise, I'll send you back myself. Feng's words shocked everyone present once more. Is he really going to do that? When Yuan Tiexin looked at Feng, he felt that Feng was even crazier than Fire Dance. Fire Dance had merely acted to preserve Zero Wing's reputation. However, Feng was blatantly declaring war on Mythology and Solar Temple. After this declaration, even if Situ Qingtian and Qiang Tianhe previously wanted to pursue negotiations for a partnership, they wouldn't do so anymore. Good. Very good. Situ Qingtian suddenly smiled as he looked at Feng. This old man admires your will to make an enemy out of Mythology and abandon 2 kingdoms. However, I'm curious to see how you plan on sending this old man back. After saying so, Situ Qingtian stood up and unsheathed the dark greatsword slung on his back. Simultaneously, not only did his body radiate a frightening aura, but the mana surrounding him also took on a near-liquid form, sparkling as it circled his silvery gray armor. Sensing the pressure he radiated, Fire Dance and the other youngsters in the room subconsciously took a step back. As expected of this old bastard. His mana body has broken through the 115% threshold. He can probably hold his own against even a superior mythic monster of the same level now. Relos was astonished when he sensed Situ Qingtian's unparalleled aura. Everyone has been saying that you are God's domain's strongest, guild leader Black Flame. This old man has been curious about the validity of this rumor for a long time now. After Situ Qingtian unleashed his aura, Qiang Tianhe, who sat nearby, also stood up and raised a crimson staff. The white robe he wore instantly transformed into a robe of flames, making it seem as if the god of fire had just descended to the mortal world. The aura he radiated was not the slightest bit inferior to Situ Qingtian's, and his level had even surpassed Situ Qingtian by 1, at level 154 already. Amazing! So, these are the apex combatants of these 2 super guilds? Yuan Tiexin was astounded as he looked at Situ Qingtian and Qiang Tianhe. Under normal circumstances, the average Tier 4 expert would have difficulty fleeing from a superior mythic monster of the same level, let alone fighting one. Yet, these 2 elderly men now radiated an aura rivaling that of a superior mythic monster of the same level. Their combat power ranked at the very top of God's domain at this stage of the game. Now, even a dozen Tier 4 experts working together would most likely have difficulty suppressing Situ Qingtian and Qiang Tianhe. Not to mention, the two's combat standards were incredibly close to reaching the Beyond Domain realm. Let's see how you recover from this now, Black Flame. Cold Shadow, who now stood at a side, grew excited when she saw that Situ Qingtian and Qiang Tianhe intended to take action. She might not know precisely how powerful Qiang Tianhe was, but she knew how powerful Situ Qingtian was. Moreover, it had been a long time since she had seen Situ Qingtian take action. With the two of them working together, even a monster like Feng would have difficulty defeating them within a short period. A fight between Feng, dubbed God's Domain's strongest expert, and two legendary figures in the virtual gaming industry deserved to be called an apex battle in God's Domain. If both sides fought for a sufficiently long time, she might gain enough insight to improve her combat standards further. Cold Shadow wasn't the only person with such thoughts. Purple Jade, Netherworld Empire's masked youth, and Solar Temple's long-haired youth were similarly curious to see how this fight would play out. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU, since you two want me to send you back, I'll grant you your wish. After glancing at the two elderly men, Feng stopped concealing his aura and mana. Immediately, the space within the room froze, a stifling pressure enveloping everyone. Even Situ Qingtian and Qiang Tianhe subconsciously stumbled 2 steps back, their eyes filled with fear and confusion as they gaped at Feng. Tier 5? The same question simultaneously ran through the minds of the two elderly men. However, before they could respond to the situation, Feng suddenly appeared before them, his movements so fast that it seemed as if he had split into two. Feng then stabbed their hearts with his sword. Afterward, Feng returned to one entity, now standing quietly by the window wall behind the two elderly men. And before anyone realized what had happened, the sword in his hand was already back in its sheath, as if Feng had never drawn it. Meanwhile, Situ Qingtian's and Qiang Tianhe's HPs, which exceeded 10 million, had zeroed out by the time everyone realized what was going on. The two's bodies then collapsed to the ground, neither managing to react from start to finish. Chapter 2871, Tier 5? They're dead? The spectators in the room were stunned to see Situ Qingtian and Qiang Tianhe collapsing to the floor, their minds failing to process this situation. Cold Shadow and the long-haired youth from Solar Temple, in particular, appeared petrified, their bodies remaining utterly motionless as they stared at the two sprawled corpses. How is this possible? The instructor failed to endure even a single hit? Compared to everyone else present, Cold Shadow and the long-haired youth had a much better understanding of Situ Qingtian's and Qiang Tianhe's strengths. Setting aside the fact that the two elderly men had combat standards close to the Beyond Domain realm, just their basic attributes and mana bodies were more than enough for them to combat superior mythic monsters of the same level. Despite being so monstrously powerful, Situ Qingtian and Qiang Tianhe had failed to mount even the slightest bit of resistance to Feng before dying. This was simply unbelievable. Yuan Tianxin and Purple Jade were similarly astonished at this situation, their minds unable to recover from the shock even after a long time. They had expected a heaven-defying battle and even felt that Feng had been unwise to provoke Situ Qingtian and Qiang Tianhe. After all, if these two superior mythic equivalents went all out, destroying Zero Wing's residence wouldn't be impossible for them. Even if Feng eventually succeeded in killing them, Zero Wing would still have to pay a significant price. Yet, now. However, unlike everyone else present, Nether King Relos's attention wasn't on Situ Qingtian's and Qiang Tianhe's corpses. Instead, he stared at Feng's figure standing calmly by the window wall, his eyes wide with fear and horror. A Tier 5 Sword Saint? Although it was only an instant, Relos had felt unprecedented fear overwhelming his body when Feng executed his attack. That spine-chilling fear hadn't come from just witnessing Feng's frightening power. Instead, it was an instinctive, bone-deep fear. Relos was no ordinary Tier 4 player, he was someone who had developed his mana body to an incredible extent. If he were facing a player of the same tier, his body wouldn't have such a reaction. The only way Relos could explain this situation was that Feng was no longer a Tier 4 player. Instead, Feng was already a Tier 5 Sword Saint. Although Relos had subconsciously muttered to himself, he had not done so on a private channel. Hence, no matter how soft his voice had been, the Tier 4 experts present heard him loud and clear. Tier 5? Everyone turned toward Feng, one after another. Previously, they had been so shocked by Situ Qingtian's and Qiyang Tianhe's deaths that they had forgotten about Feng's existence and the brief stagnation and fear they had felt. How is this possible? He's reached Tier 5 already? Cold Shadow and the long-haired youth wore grim expressions as they looked at Feng, their minds in denial. Feng no longer concealed his power. Hence, everyone in the room could feel tremendous pressure originating from a difference in life rating. Feng's life rating was something no Tier 4 player could possess, no matter what. If a Tier 4 player's life rating were equated to a bonfire, then Feng's life rating was like the scorching sun. Unless he deliberately suppressed and concealed his life rating, there was no way anybody could fail to notice it. Is this why he dares to ignore the two super guilds? When Yuan Tiexin looked at Situ Qingtian's and Qiyang Tianhe's corpses and then at Feng's nonchalance, the shock in his heart multiplied exponentially. Meanwhile, Purple Jade was at a loss for words, a complicated expression on her face. She had come to Zero Wing City to determine her growth and whether she could catch up to Feng. However, let alone catching up, the two of them weren't even standing on the same playing field anymore. Tier 5. In the current era, Tier 5 existences were already considered the apex existences of God's domain. They were capable of single-handedly destroying an entire kingdom, monsters that no current Tier 4 player could hope to go up against. Guild Leader. Fire Dance's eyes brimmed with jubilation and shock when she looked at Feng. This revelation was too shocking. If Zero Wing still had to be fearful of the 5 great super guilds before, then it could now ignore their existence. After all, the gap between Tier 4 and Tier 5 was utterly massive. Even if the 5 great super guilds had many monstrously strong players and even individuals at the Beyond Domain realm, none of them would be a match for a Tier 5 existence. Unless the 5 great super guilds similarly produced a Tier 5 expert, it wouldn't matter, even if they attacked Zero Wing with a large number of Tier 4 experts. Not to mention, destroying a guild city was child's play for a Tier 5 player. Only a main city-level guild city could repulse a Tier 5. Moreover, if one didn't have any means of retaliation, even a main city would eventually fall to a Tier 5 player. While Fire Dance was inwardly celebrating Feng's achievement, Feng turned his sights to Cold Shadow and the long-haired youth from Solar Temple. He then said calmly, "I only dealt a small punishment to the two of them today. If your 2 guilds pull such a stunt one more time, I won't mind visiting your headquarters." Cold Shadow and the long-haired youth did not have any thoughts of refuting Feng. They promptly left the reception room, together with their guild members. Netherworld Empires and Secret Pavilions members quietly watched with complicated feelings as the 2 super guilds members left. Before, they had been treating Zero Wing as just another superpower. However, it wouldn't be an exaggeration to call Zero Wing the #1 guild of God's domain now. Not only did Zero Wing possess a Tier 5 Sword Saint, but it even had a holy land like Zero Wing City. At this point, even the 5 great super guilds couldn't hope to compete with it. Given enough time, Zero Wing was sure to become God's domain's #1 guild. At this point, Relos suddenly stood up from his seat, approached Feng, and said respectfully, "Guild Leader Black Flame, Relos, wish to establish a partnership with Zero Wing on behalf of Netherworld Empire. We do not want much. We only need 1 temporary guild residence in Zero Wing City. In return, Netherworld Empire will provide Zero Wing with resources and business connections in the Western continent. We will also establish a military alliance with Zero Wing to resist the Outer World players. May I know what you think of this proposal, Guild Leader Black Flame? Although Relos's respectful demeanor and sincere offer might seem surprising to others, the masked youth from Netherworld Empire and Yuan Tiexin did not find this situation unexpected at all. While reaching Tier 5 might not be impossible for an expert like Relos, it would still be incredibly challenging. This was because the promotion to Tier 5 had nothing to do with a player's combat standards. Instead, it depended entirely on one's control over and understanding of mana and the ability to construct a Tier 5 mana body. Before reaching Tier 5 himself, Relos would only be seeking death if he behaved arrogantly in front of a Tier 5 existence. Not one to fall behind, Yuan Tiexin also extended a similar partnership offer on behalf of the Secret Pavilion. The only difference was that the Secret Pavilion would only help defend Zero Wing City and Stone Forest City, it would not take part in any other battles. Sure, I can agree to your conditions, Feng said after hearing the two guilds' offers. However, I have an additional condition. Upon receiving this encouraging response, Relos grew a little excited and prompted, "Please speak, Guild Leader Black Flame." Initially, Relos thought that Feng wouldn't agree to his offer and would choose to monopolize Zero Wing City's resources. Feng's willingness to negotiate was a positive outcome. Yuan Tiexin also nodded in agreement with Relos's words. Feng smiled and said, "My condition is simple: a complete guild legacy. If your two guilds can provide me with your complete guild legacies, I can give you temporary residences in Zero Wing City immediately." Zero Wing was not lacking in resources at the moment. So long as Zero Wing City remained standing, the guild would have no trouble acquiring resources. However, a guild's development did not rely solely on resources. It also needed manpower and talents. Hence, acquiring a complete guild legacy was of utmost importance for Zero Wing. Only with a complete guild legacy could Zero Wing reliably nurture its experts to the domain realm. "Okay, I agree to your condition on Netherworld Empire's behalf," Relos answered without hesitation. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. Upon hearing Relos's response, Yuan Tiexin gritted his teeth and said, "The Secret Pavilion has no problem with this either." When Feng heard the two guilds' positive replies, he inwardly sighed in relief. After all, a guild legacy was the root of a guild. Many guilds would rather face annihilation than share their guild legacy. He then nodded and said, "Good. I wish our three guilds a happy partnership from now on." Shortly afterward, Feng signed a contract with the Secret Pavilion and Netherworld Empire, taking an essential step toward Zero Wing's becoming God's Domain's #1 guild. As Feng concluded his discussion with the two guilds, news of his promotion to Tier 5 and his killing Situ Qing Tian and Qiang Tianhe in Zero Wing City quickly spread and reached the ears of God's Domain's various powers. For a time, the entire God's Domain was in an uproar. Chapter 2872, God's Domain shaken. Zero Wing City, Battle Arena. Guild Leader Black Flame has been promoted to Tier 5? 16th Cloud was stunned when she read the report she received. Looking at Sorrowful Silence, she asked, "Have you verified this?" Although quite a number of God's Domain's Void Realm experts had gotten promoted to Tier 4 already, with Domain Realm experts even making considerable progress in developing their mana bodies, everyone was still a long way from reaching Tier 5. Creating a Tier 5 mana body was an entirely different matter from improving the completion rate of one's mana body. Since most Tier 4 experts hadn't even developed their mana bodies to a significant extent, getting promoted to Tier 5 shouldn't be possible. Hence, 16th Cloud found it truly hard to believe that Feng had already reached Tier 5. However, instead of getting the answer she hoped for, Sorrowful Silence nodded solemnly. He then said in a shocked voice, "Yes, I happened to be in another reception room at the time, negotiating with Zero Wing's representative for a long-term lease of the battle arena's combat rooms. My room was quite close to the reception room used to host the secret pavilion and the 3 super guilds. Every Zero Wing member on the floor reacted strongly. I also saw Mythologies and Solar Temple's members leave the residence, looking grim. In reality, Sorrowful Silence didn't just hear about Xiaofang's promotion to Tier 5 from Zero Wing's members. He had also personally experienced the frightening aura Xiaofan had exuded. Despite being in an entirely different room, he had still sensed that aura clearly, and it had been much stronger than the auras of the Tier 5 NPCs he had come across before. Of course, the Tier 5 NPCs Sorrowful Silence met previously had never displayed any killing intent. They had even been actively suppressing their auras. In comparison, Xiaofan had not held anything back when he attacked Situ Qingtian and Qiang Tianhe. This was why Sorrowful Silence was confident Xiaofan had reached Tier 5. This is interesting. 16th Cloud revealed a hint of joy and excitement after hearing Sorrowful Silence's confirmation. Now that Zero Wing has a Tier 5 combatant and opened Zero Wing City to the public, the Eastern Continent's status quo will get reshuffled. That's right. Thank goodness we're already strategic allies with Zero Wing. Sorrowful Silence said, nodding in agreement with 16th Cloud. Tier 5 existences were different from Tier 4 existences. Tier 4 players couldn't capture a guild city all by themselves. That was a task that required a large number of Tier 4 players. When Tier 4 players were still scarce, Zero Wing might have been able to pose a significant threat to the various superpowers, but it didn't threaten their roots. However, the situation had changed. A Tier 5 player could effortlessly capture a guild city, even a superpower's headquarters, which meant that Zero Wing had the power to uproot and destroy superpowers. Moreover, now that Zero Wing's expert count had skyrocketed, it was entirely capable of expanding its territory and occupying more guild cities. It wouldn't face a manpower shortage even if it captured 5 or 6 more guild cities. When the Eastern Continent's various powers received this piece of news, the superpowers that had always been working against Zero Wing fell into an awkward situation. This was especially true for Starlink. Upon learning about Xiaofang's promotion to Tier 5, Starlink's executives all had ashen complexions. Inside the guild leader's office of Starlink's residence in the Dark Knight Empire. Commander, now that Black Flame has gotten promoted to Tier 5, he definitely won't spare Starlink. Should we migrate our experts to the Western Continent now? A level 150, Tier 4 female ranger suggested as she looked at the handsome youth quietly reading documents in the office. How many times have I told you to refer to me as guild leader? I am no longer just the commander of Tremor's Clown but Starlink's guild leader as well, Lu Tiandi said as he glanced at the enchanting female ranger. Yes, guild leader, the ranger responded calmly as she looked at Lu Tiandi. She then repeated, should we migrate now? That won't be necessary. Looking at the report in his hands, Lu Tiandi explained nonchalantly, Black Flame's promotion to Tier 5 is indeed a big problem for us, but there's no need for us to be afraid of him yet. The Eastern Continent situation is no longer the same as before. The Outer World's forces are Zero Wing's biggest problem. Black Flame's promotion to Tier 5 should pose a considerable headache for those Outer World players. Moreover, Zero Wing has severed all chances of friendly relations with Mythology and Solar Temple. In the next war, the Eastern Continent's native NPC forces will definitely not provide Star Moon Kingdom and the Twin Towers Kingdom with any support. At that time, Zero Wing might not even be able to defend its own guild cities, let alone target other forces. If I were Black Flame, I wouldn't have exposed myself as a Tier 5 so soon and become a target for the Outer World forces. Instead, I would focus on raiding dungeons and world bosses to raise my guild strength. God's Domain isn't a single-player game. A single Tier 5 player cannot stop all of the Outer World's NPC forces. The enchanting ranger's eyes brightened at Lu Tiandi's words. Doesn't this mean we have a chance? We can forget about Silverwing City since the outer world forces will capture it. On the other hand, we can get our hands on Stone Forest City since it is close to the Dark Knight Empire. Even if Black Flame is Tier 5, he can defend only one location at a time. Once the war resumes, he'll be preoccupied with Zero Wing City. At that time, we can find an opportunity to secure Stone Forest City. Lu Tiandi said, smiling. However, this isn't something we can accomplish alone. Go and contact the superpowers that have a grudge against Zero Wing now. I believe they will be more than willing to come on board this plan. Yes, sir. The ranger nodded. While God's Domain's various powers were reeling from the news of Feng's promotion to Tier 5 and preparing countermeasures, Feng had finalized his discussion with the Secret Pavilion and Netherworld Empire over the specifics of their partnership. Guild leader, now that we have the two guild legacies, we can probably nurture a batch of Void Realm experts and possibly Domain Realm experts within a short period, Fire Dance said. When she thought about how the Secret Pavilion and Netherworld Empire would be sending all their information on the Realms of Refinement to Zero Wing's headquarters tomorrow, she couldn't help feeling excited. Although the Guild Legacy Zero Wing received from Unyielding Soul previously was indeed valuable, the information provided allowed Zero Wing to nurture experts only to the Flowing Water Realm at a reliable rate. It was still a far cry from a complete Guild Legacy. After all, only Void Realm experts could serve as a superpower's mainstay. Zero Wing had far too few of such peak experts. The only reason Zero Wing managed to produce as many Tier 4 experts as it had now was the various God's Domain legacies and excellent training environment the guild possessed. Even then, these Tier 4 experts could only rank among the lower rungs of Tier 4 players. That's right. Feng nodded. He similarly felt happy over this matter. Only when Zero Wing possessed a complete guild legacy of its own could it become a true titan in God's Domain. Once the guild had the Secret Pavilions and Netherworld Empire's guild legacies, it would no longer have to worry about lacking peak experts. Zero Wing could also recruit more talented players since these talents would no longer have to worry about Zero Wing lacking a guild legacy. Guild leader, what should we do next? Fire Dance asked. Now that we've become enemies with Mythology and Solar Temple, the Outer World forces will target Starmoon Kingdom and the Twin Towers Kingdom once the war resumes. Should we start withdrawing our forces from those two kingdoms? Mythology and Solar Temple held significant influence in the Eastern continent. It was also certain that the Outer World forces would target Zero Wing. However, with Zero Wing's current strength, defending Starmoon Kingdom and the Twin Towers Kingdom wouldn't be feasible. To reduce Zero Wing's losses, the guild ought to begin pulling its forces out of these two kingdoms as soon as possible. Next. Chuckling, Feng said, go and gather all of the guild's Tier 4s now. Gather all of the guild's Tier 48? Feng's command confused Fire Dance. With the imminent war, what they should do was relocate the mobile fortress and Silverwing City. Otherwise, once the Outer World's NPC army arrived, Zero Wing would lose both strongholds. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Yes. Smiling, Feng said, since I've reached Tier 5 already, it's about time we took care of the trouble over at the Orc Empire. We'll also use this opportunity to let the various superpowers know the consequences of offending us. The current God's Domain had far too little knowledge of Tier 5 existences. Even if Feng had killed Situ Qingtian and Qiang Tianhe, the various superpowers only knew that he was much stronger than Tier 4 players. They still didn't understand what Tier 5 represented. I'll have them gather right away. Fire Dance burned with eagerness when she heard Feng's words. Ever since she had gotten promoted to Tier 4, she had never had a good fight or launched an all-out war against other superpowers. She also wasn't the only person to hold such sentiments. The other Tier 4 experts in the guild harbored similar thoughts. Now, they finally had the opportunity to display their strength. Chapter 2873, Present Zero-Wing Orc Empire, Silverwing City. Droves of people came and went on the city's main street. More than half of these people were NPCs from the neighboring kingdoms and empires. Due to the world passages opening and the invasion of the Outer Worlds player and NPC forces, both native players and NPCs had their range of activity restricted significantly. As the strongest city in the Orc Empire, one capable of fending off attacks from anything below Tier 5, Silverwing City had already become a mecca for the neighboring kingdoms and empires players and NPCs. Moreover, the news of Black Flame reaching Tier 5 sent the number of players visiting Silverwing City skyrocketing, resulting in overcrowding. All of these new arrivals sought to join Zero Wing and develop long-term in Silverwing City. At this time, Tier 4 experts radiating frightening auras appeared in Zero Wing's residence, one after another. The arrival of these experts instantly silenced the bustling residents. Even the players lining up to take the test to join the guild couldn't help feeling frightened. What's going on with Zero Wing? Why have so many Tier 4 experts gathered? Are they here to maintain order since there are so many people applying to join the guild? Amazing! So, this is Zero Wing? I saw over 50 Tier 4 experts already. Some super guilds don't have this many Tier 4 experts. That's not all of it. Look at their equipment. Every one of them has at least 3 pieces of level 150 epic equipment. I wonder when I'll be able to get one for myself? The eyes of the players lined up in the residence's courtyard widened in shock as they took in Zero Wing's Tier 4 experts. Previously, they had recognized that Zero Wing was a powerful guild but felt that it had become a superpower in God's domain only because of Zero Wing City and Black Flame's undefeated legend. Upon seeing the situation now, they realized that Zero Wing's foundation was far more terrifying than they thought. Not only did Zero Wing possess far more Tier 4 experts than most superpowers, but these experts also had superior equipment standards compared to the various superpowers Tier 4 experts. Currently, over 50 Tier 4 experts were gathered in the courtyard. This was a spectacular scene that those present would rarely get to see in their lifetimes. Not to mention, these Tier 4 experts were not repressing their auras at all. When these auras overlapped, they came together to generate an aura far more frightening than that of superior mythic monsters. Even Tier 3 experts shuddered involuntarily, forced to keep their distance from these Tier 4 experts. Why would Zero Wing gather so many Tier 4 experts here? Is it conducting a major operation or something? This is indeed unusual. A guild would gather so many of its Tier 4 experts in one place only for a special event. As the number of Tier 4 experts kept increasing, the non-members in the courtyard felt something amiss. Even Zero Wing's members started growing antsy at this situation. Ji Luorong looked at Violet Cloud, who had just arrived in the courtyard, and asked, "Big Sis Violet, do you know why the guild leader suddenly summoned us?" "I don't know, either. Big Sis Fire suddenly contacted me and told me to come here right away," Violet Cloud replied, shaking her head. She then visually inspected Ji Luorong and exclaimed in surprise, "Luorong, your mana body is at the 110% completion rate already? You've made so much progress." Ji Luorong had joined Zero Wing only recently. Although Zero Wing was much stronger than before, the fact that Ji Luorong managed to increase her mana body's completion rate from under 105% to her current 110% proved that she was monstrously talented. Hee. It's because of the sword Saint Legacy Big Sis Fire gave me. If not for it, I would have taken much longer to reach 110%, Ji Luorong said, smiling. Inwardly, she still felt a little delighted. After all, only a tiny number of experts in God's domain had managed to develop their mana bodies to a 110% completion rate at this stage of the game. However, When Ji Luorong carefully sensed the mana surrounding Violet Cloud's body, her delight instantly vanished. The mana close to Violet Cloud had already liquefied. Although it was limited to a small portion of her mana, it was still better than nothing. The fact that Violet Cloud could accomplish this feat meant that her mana body's completion rate had already reached 115% or above, according to what Feng told them. She might have even reached the 120% completion rate already. At this time, a masked, middle-aged man clad in black approached Ji Luorong. The aura this man radiated practically rivaled that of a superior mythic monster. This middle-aged man was none other than Crimson Mask, another Eternal Glory member who had joined Zero Wing. "Commander, why did Big Sis Fire suddenly call for us? Is something big going on?" Crimson Mask asked curiously as he looked at Ji Luorong. "I don't know. Big Sis Fire only told me to come here as soon as possible and nothing else." Ji Luorong shook her head. When she noticed the qualitative transformation of Crimson Mask's demeanor, she couldn't help sighing to herself ruefully. B**B greater than Y/B. Initially, Crimson Mask had opposed Eternal Glories joining Zero Wing. He felt that even without joining a guild, he could still develop Eternal Glory to great heights. However, after a few bouts with Fire Dance and receiving a sound thrashing each time, Crimson Mask had changed completely. Now, he was even referring to Fire Dance as Big Sis. However, Crimson Mask was much more fortunate than someone else, his fate considerably better. Besides Crimson Mask, a lunatic named Invincible Swallow had come to Zero Wing to challenge Violet Cloud, and the fate this lunatic suffered was simply terrible. That fight could be described as an adult beating up a toddler. Afterward, when Invincible Swallow returned for a rematch at a later date, Violet Cloud just so happened to be out on an errand. Aqua Rose had been present at the time, so he challenged her instead. After that match, Invincible Swallow began questioning his life. Even now, he was still training crazily in Stone Forest City's battle arena every day. While Zero Wing's Tier 4 members wondered why Fire Dance had suddenly gathered them, a man and a woman approached the courtyard from a distance. These two people were none other than Feng and Fire Dance. Feng was just walking casually, yet his steps distorted the space around him. It was as if the surrounding space couldn't contain his presence and could crumble at any time. In addition, as Feng did not bother concealing his aura, everyone present gasped involuntarily when they sensed it. Although Feng wasn't directing any hostility at anyone, merely letting his aura radiate freely, the Tier 4 players present felt their bodies becoming incredibly heavy as if someone had tied metal weights to their bodies. As for the Tier 3 players present, they instinctively retreated from Feng, not daring to move even an inch closer to him. "He's the guild leader?" Crimson Mask was shocked as he looked at Feng. Before today, Crimson Mask had only ever heard the name of Black Flame. From the gossip circulating inside Zero Wing, he knew that Feng was Zero Wing's #1 expert and that his existence was the linchpin of the entire guild. Crimson Mask had thought that Feng was only slightly stronger than Fire Dance. However, given this situation, Feng wasn't just somewhat stronger than Fire Dance. He was practically standing on a whole other level. Aside from Crimson Mask, many of the Tier 4 experts who had joined Zero Wing recently were also stunned by Feng's terrifying aura. After glancing at the crowd gathered, Fire Dance reported to Feng, guild leader, apart from the 2 vice guild leaders and around a dozen others, who are currently occupied with important matters, all of the guild's Tier 4 members are here. Not bad. Feng nodded in approval as he scanned the crowd before him. A total of 59 Tier 4 players waited in the courtyard, their levels ranging from level 148 to level 156. More than half of these players had broken through the 100% threshold of their mana bodies already, with nearly 20 having reached the 105% threshold and 7 at the 110% threshold. The 7 to reach 110% completion rate or above were Violet Cloud, Fire Dance, Ji Luorong, Alluring Summer, Yan Tianxing, Luofei, and Silent Blade. One could consider this lineup a spectacular force at this stage of the game. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU at this time, Kola, who had already reached level 150, could no longer hold back his excitement, asking, Guild Leader, are we going to raid the Orc capital city? The Orc capital city's core area was a special secret land. The degree of danger in this secret land closely rivaled that of a God mode regional dungeon. The loot inside was likewise incredible. However, one required a sufficiently large team of Tier 4 players to raid it. This was why nobody had succeeded in raiding it even now. Meanwhile, Zero Wing currently had 59 Tier 4 players and 1 Tier 5 player gathered. They were already more than qualified to raid the Orc capital city's secret land. When everyone heard Kola's words, they immediately grew restless. After all, this was a level 150+ secret land they were talking about. They would definitely gain significant harvests if they raided it. No, I didn't gather you here for the Orc capital city, but for something else instead, Feng said, shaking his head. Something else? Kola and the others grew confused. That's right. Smiling, Feng explained, to ensure our survival in the upcoming war and Zero Wing's future development, I plan on annihilating Ancient Rock City and eliminating Beast Emperor from the Orc Empire.